Post-Apocalyptic black technology battleship system. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26 Aliens are coming. Chapter 26 Aliens are coming. The gap in the car array has been completely torn open, and the zombie wave has flooded most of the gas station. Human survivors and zombies are mixed together, and there are panic screams and miserable howls everywhere. Point and that terrifying and dark extreme mutant was tearing apart the 2nd Infantry fighting vehicle in front of it at this moment. Point the entire gas station was in chaos, and every survivor was looking for a way out. Yika's Vying group was the first convoy to rush out. Their people moved the vehicles on the other side of the gas station and rushed out. But at this moment, the outside of the gas station was full of zombies. They seized this gap and rushed out. However, before the second convoy also rushed out, the zombies poured in through this gap. Although there was no frontal one, the tide of corpses was terrifying, but it also greatly restricted the survivors' escape, blocking a large number of survivors at Shenzhen's exit point. Wang Jingfu is the person stuck here. Point in the previous time, he pulled up a team of more than 30 survivors with 5 or 6 vehicles. He wanted to rush out with the bosses of the Vying group, but they were almost killed by the vehicle prepared by Yika's. The suicide car was knocked over. Wang Jingfu looked at the car that rushed into the zombies and the large number of panicked survivors on it. He immediately understood the cause and effect. At a certain moment, this greasy middle-aged fat man even thought about deceiving others. Open the way this way. Point however, Wang Jingfu quickly gave up this tempting idea because Yika's could use this method, but he couldn't. He was just an ordinary survivor, and he didn't have much ability. Only by joining a group could he increase his survival rate. Now he is cheating. Killing others can only push yourself into a pit of fire. Point but Wang Jingfu looked at the zombies everywhere, but his heart became colder and colder. He looked at the aircraft rising not far away. In addition to shock and disbelief, he wanted to take a ride in the chaos. He didn't know that the aircraft was the battleship of Xia Bai, who had a feud with him. Point. Even if you can't get on that aircraft, you can just follow it. However, before Wang Jingfu could take action, he saw with fear that the Sci-Fi aircraft opened fire. The first target of the attack was not zombies, but a group of punk-style human survivors. Shuttle 3 was shot down by millimeter-caliber bullets, and those people turned into parts that were even more fragmentary than zombies. Wang Jingfu looked at the dead souls. At this time, one of his younger brothers sitting on the other side said in shock, "Brother Huang, are they really aliens?" Originally, Wang Jingfu didn't even think about it. Point the apocalypse is the apocalypse. Zombies are zombies. What do they have to do with aliens? But after his younger brother said this, the more Wang Jingfu thought about it, the more he realized it. Point the aircraft appeared suddenly in the chaos. Wang Jingfu didn't notice the changes in Xia Bai's battleship at all, and such a big thing couldn't have been in the gas station before. It probably just flew over, and judging from the shape, it doesn't look like something from any country on Earth. The most important point is, as soon as this thing appeared, it shot the survivors without hesitation. If this aircraft was driven by people on Earth, how could it be everywhere? Shooting survivors in case of zombies. The more Wang Jingfu thought about it, the more he realized this. The more he looked at the aircraft, the more it looked like an alien spaceship. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead, and his oily face was white as snow, as if he had seen a ghost. Point. When his younger brother saw this, his heart was trembling with fear, and he trembled. "Brother Huang, what should we do?" Wang Jingfu looked at the flames, zombies and alien spacecraft outside. After a moment, he gritted his teeth and said, "Let's blow up the gas station and blow up all these aliens and zombies into the sky, blasting a bloody path." His younger brother was shocked when he heard this and said, "There are still so many survivors here." "Screw the survivors, as long as we survive." At the same moment, in Xia Bai's battleship, "Kill these turtles to death." This was Hao Zhuang shouting excitedly. This guy had a straightforward character. Watching Xia Bai shoot down those yellow hairs with bullets, even if he was just a bystander, He felt the same and his blood boiled. The lean man sitting in the driver's seat held the joystick tightly and said with excitement, "This kind of person deserves to be killed more than a zombie." At the back of the battleship, Balan temporarily stopped the bleeding with the help of 2 other girls, and the wound was simply treated. But Balan's face looked unusually pale. In this situation, there was nothing he could do. Take out the bullet point at the fort. Xia Bai slowly exhaled after confirming that the last guy was shot. It only took less than 10 seconds from the time he opened fire to the time he shot all the people. The group of guys who were extremely arrogant just now were shot dead as they fled in panic. Even if they have pistols, they can only run away in front of battleships and machine guns. In fact, even if Xia Bai didn't open fire, in this situation, these guys had no cars and no supplies, and the final result would be that they would be eaten up by zombies. But Xia Bai was indeed annoyed by this group of people. It is precisely because of such existence in the apocalypse that many people who could have survived were killed abruptly. And now, Balan was shot, and Xia Bai also missed the opportunity to join forces with the military to fight against the zombies. The zombies pouring into the gap have already shown the trend of flooding, and now half of the gas station has been filled with zombies. It is swallowed up and cannot be stopped at all, and the situation has developed to the worst point at this moment. The lean boy in the driver's seat suddenly exclaimed, "Big boss, Xia." Bai turned his head immediately and saw the extreme mutant jumping high among the flames and zombies, and the target it was killing was the battleship they were on. Everyone in the battleship panicked, but Xia Bai had expected this. His battleship was too eye-catching, and it had just opened fire again. The sound of the cannon firing was like thunder, and even zombies were attracted in large numbers. It is impossible not to be attracted to this extreme mutant. Zombie Xia Bai doesn't care. His battleship is now more than 3 meters in the air. It's difficult for zombies to climb up in a short time, but this extreme mutant can reach a height of 4 to 5 meters in one leap. The turret of this battleship can be rotated 360 degrees. Xia Bai directly turned the turret and aimed at this extreme mutant. The next moment, Xia Bai's machine cannon began to spit out tongues of fire crazily, and Xia Bai the voice also echoed in the battleship, "Turn around and kill it." However, everyone who was attracted by this extreme mutant did not realize that Huang Jingfu was sending a group of people straight towards the direction of the gas pumps and oil tanks. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Chapter 27 Explosion. Chapter 27 Explosion. A 30mm machine gun is enough to easily tear a living person into pieces in an instant, but when it hits the extreme mutant's body, it only explodes streaks of blood on it, knocking it out of the way. It was hit hard in the sky. This monster began to run above the ground, running around the aircraft at an extremely fast speed. Even if Xia Bai and the lean boy operated together, it was still difficult for the bullets to catch up with it. After a shuttle of bullets hit it, the zombies were wiped out, but he didn't even touch the edge of the monster under the surging tide of zombies. The zombies were extremely dense. Under the machine gun, more than a dozen would be killed alive in an instant. In just a short time, the energy points displayed in Xia Bai's battleship had skyrocketed to more than 100. Xia Bai realized that he couldn't fight like this. A 30mm caliber bullet has 5 energy points per bullet. Xia Bai has limited energy points. He didn't produce many in total during the previous build. The warship's manufacturing facilities are currently not at a high level, so it is impossible to immediately produce ammunition to replenish it. If the fight continued like this, Xia Bai might have run out of bullets before killing the extreme mutant. Therefore, at this moment, Xia Bai suddenly said, "Stop." The lean boy below was slightly startled, but he still followed the instructions immediately and steadily hovered the battleship in midair. Then, everyone realized that Xia Bai's fort also stopped firing. Along with the ceasefire of the fort, the extreme mutant that was running at high speed also stopped for a while. The few shots that Xia Bai hit it just now left the thing's skin torn open and its flesh and blood blurred. It paused not far in front of the battleship. Xia Bai knew that, although extreme mutants were also born out of alien zombie viruses, they were different from zombies and more like beasts, with clear 5 senses and a certain amount of intelligence. At this moment, it noticed the moment Xia Bai ceased fire His body was slightly arched, in a posture that thunder might strike at any time, and his eyes were filled with bloodthirsty light. Hao Zhuang and others looked at Xia Bai in confusion, wondering why they had to cease fire at this critical moment. Xia Bai took a deep breath and grabbed the freezing bomb point, and at this moment, the extreme mutant on the ground suddenly started to move. Its body was like a bolt of lightning, rising from the spot and rushing directly towards the battleship. However, it was at this moment that Xia Bai opened the top cover of the fort, stretched out half of his body, and threw the freezing bomb directly amidst the exclamations of Hao Zhuang and others. The thing drew a perfect parabola in midair and landed steadily beside the extreme mutant. However, it did not explode immediately, but when the extreme mutant flew about 2 meters away like lightning, then it exploded. Xia Bai realized that he had miscalculated the explosion time. However, there is no one in this world who does not make mistakes. Even if he is a reborn person, he cannot change this, and the next moment, the freezing bomb exploded. A large amount of steam rose up, and a sheet of ice spread out on the ground, instantly turning 7 or 8 square meters around the bomb into ice. Even though the monster was fast, one of its right feet was also covered in ice. It was instantly frozen on the ground and hit the ground heavily with its body. However, it went crazy to the extreme and its right leg was frozen. Instead, it struggled wildly regardless. Visible to the naked eye, its frozen right leg, the leg was torn apart inch by inch. If it continued to struggle, its right leg would probably be torn off by it. Everyone in the battleship looked at this scene with expressions of shock. The lean boy even shouted, "Zhao Ko, what is this?" But Xia Bai had already pressed down the muzzle of the machine gun again and fired directly. The machine gun let out a thunderous roar, and countless bullets directly hit the extreme mutant on the ground like a living target. Blood spattered in an instant. The monster let out a crazy howl and struggled even harder, but at this moment, the gas station exploded. Wang Jingfu and the others succeeded. The gas station was detonated on the spot, and the fire instantly engulfed the entire gas station like a wave. Wang Jingfu and the others were well prepared, and had already started rushing out of the gas station before the explosion, but they still underestimated the power of the gas station. Under the sweep of the shockwave, several vehicles behind their convoy were directly engulfed in flames, and the remaining everyone was in disarray. Wang Jingfu, who treacherously rushed to the front of the convoy, became one of the lucky few. He jumped through the zombies that were also blown away by the shockwave, narrowly escaped from the explosion range, and finally rushed out. A wave of corpses after narrowly surviving. Wang Jingfu was so excited that the fat on his fat face was trembling wildly. He roared excitedly, "Fuck Grandma's zombies, fuck Grandma's aliens, and fuck Grandma's survivors. Am I not the one who survives to the end?" However, he couldn't be excited for long, because soon, he noticed that his little brother didn't look excited at all, and looked in the direction of the gas station behind with a pale face. Wang Jingfu realized something and looked back, and then he saw a scene that made him fear from his position. He could clearly see that in the direction of the gas station, among the rising flames and thick smoke, a pitch black aircraft was rising slowly. In the flames, it showed an amazing sight. Shocking sense of cold and hard technology. Wang Jingfu changed color, and he hit his driver on the back of the head. "Drive, go, 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 go." At the same moment, Xia Bai slowly breathed a sigh of relief. At the moment of the explosion, Xia Bai directly replaced the lean boy in the driver's seat, activated the fully enclosed impact-resistant form of the battleship, and ate the explosion. However, despite this, Xia Bai also received one after another sounded in Xia Bai's mind. "Warning, your outer defense module is seriously damaged and requires urgent repair. Warning, your battleship has been damaged to 73%. Please stop for maintenance immediately." Xia Bai cursed, "Which heartless idiot blew up a gas station? How?" Zhuang and others looked at each other and thought, "I guess you blew up this gas station yourself, right?" However, Xia Bai felt that it was more likely that someone had exploded the gas station. How could a gas station explode so easily? Not to mention its original protective measures. The military had inspected it when it retreated, and the military always fired outwards. Zombies don't throw bombs or anything, even when they fire themselves. They carefully avoided those deadly things, and few of the survivors had gunpowder weapons in their hands, but now was obviously not the time to study this. Xia Bai raised the outer armor of the battleship and re-exposed the glass layer, preparing to continue to hit the extreme mutants and seize the time to leave point. However, what Xia Bai didn't expect was that as soon as he raised the outer armor, he saw a black shadow hitting the glass outside the cockpit and making a loud noise. Even Xia Bai was shocked. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Overturned. Chapter 28 Overturned. This is a terrifying scene like a ghost movie. The battleship had just risen from the firelight, and the fully enclosed defense decks on both sides had just risen. A group of black shadows came directly up and hit the front cabin of the battleship in front of Xia Bai, making a loud noise. Scarlet blood splashed everywhere. Everyone was in a state of shock. They were so frightened by this monster that the whole place was filled with screams. Xia Bai took a closer look and realized that it was actually the extreme mutant. It is not dead yet, but it is not far away. Its body has been torn to pieces and blood is spattered everywhere. The whole body is almost turned into a big blurry ball of flesh and blood, and it is impossible to tell what it was originally. An arrogant and powerful life form. But it still struggled to pounce on Xia Bai's battleship, and even raised its already bloody arm high, as if it wanted to launch an attack, but it ultimately failed. The raised claws fell down weakly, and then, the monster's body also slid downwards, falling heavily to the ground below. In the blink of an eye, it was engulfed by the flames above the ground, and it could no longer die. This is inevitable. When it was hit by the freezing bomb and became a living target, Xia Bai fired at least 20 or 30 rounds of bullets on it. The power of the 30mm caliber cannon should not be underestimated. At that time, this monster id was almost beaten to death by Xia Bai, and the subsequent explosion caused more serious injuries to it. It was a miracle that it didn't die immediately. Xia Bai glanced at the slot of his energy point. The numbers above were already in single digits, but at this moment, the numbers jumped to 277. With the death of the extreme mutant, the energy point display screen, the amount on the list jumped again at this moment. In Xia Bai's somewhat dull eyes, it jumped by a full 100 points and suddenly became 377. When Xia Bai fired with machine guns just now, he killed not dozens, but nearly 100 zombies. The gas station exploded. Although Xia Bai did not kill the zombies directly, the battleship seemed to have absorbed some of the energy points from it. The reason why, partly because there were nearly 1,000 zombies crowded into the gas station just now. If he could absorb them all, Xia Bai's current energy would have exceeded 1,000. However, an extreme mutant can actually absorb 100 energy points. This is a bit exaggerated. Xia Bai said frantically. Give me 20 more such extreme mutants. Of course, Xia Bai just thought about it. Although extreme mutants can contribute a lot of energy points, they are also very dangerous things. If 20 of them really come, Xia Bai will have no choice but to run away. Warning, the current damage to the battleship has reached 75%. Please stop immediately for repairs. This system prompt successfully brought Xia Bai, who was immersed in the fantasy of killing 20 extreme mutants, to earn 2000 energy points, back to reality. The interior of the battleship was seriously damaged, and the outside was also burned by flames. Although he was sitting on, you can't feel the slightest bit of temperature inside the battleship, but if you continue to stay here, Xia Bai's battleship will probably be the first to finish playing. It was obviously impossible to stop nearby. The explosion at the gas station briefly cleared away the zombies nearby, but more zombies were swarming from all directions of the gas station. These things have no thinking ability or vision. Only the sound and the breath of living people can attract them. At this moment, the living people at the scene have basically turned into kebabs, and the explosion at the gas station is even louder than the concert. The scene is more lively, which means that this burning gas station is bound to attract more zombies in a short period of time. To stop here is to court death. At that moment, Xia Bai took a deep breath and directly pulled up the joystick in front of him. The battleship slowly turned under his control, flying at an ultra-low altitude, and rushed directly away from the driveway and the gas station. The heads of numerous swarming zombies passed by. Some zombies were attracted by the battleship. They jumped high and tried to cling to the battleship, but they were all knocked away or thrown away mercilessly. The warship was severely damaged and would be completely scrapped if it was not repaired. Sparks began to fly from the inside. Therefore, Xia Bai was eager to find a safe enough place to carry out emergency repairs. He drove very fast, completely at full speed. As for Hao Zuan and others in the battleship, they couldn't hear the system prompts and didn't know the specific situation of the battleship. Instead, they seemed a little excited. Who are you kidding? This is the first time to ride on something like this. Who wouldn't be excited? The lean boy seemed to be a real fan of driving related things. He couldn't put it down and touched the entire battleship as if caressing his own lover, even though the interior of the battleship was already sputtering with electricity. There were sparks, and he was also in high spirits. Balan was sitting in the corner, her face looking extremely pale. Everyone here is a student. No one has actually dealt with a gunshot wound. No one has even been shot. Although people who watch TV seem to be shot when they are shot, in reality, it feels like being shot. But completely different. Fortunately, Balan's mental quality was good, and he was still very calm at the moment, sitting in the corner, gritting his teeth, and saying nothing. But Xia Bai in front had already rushed out of this area in a battleship at high speed, and with the help of the terrifying speed of the battleship, he completely got rid of the zombies behind. Xia Bai remembered that there should be a home furnishing mall in this area. There should be no people there and there wouldn't be many zombies. It would be an excellent temporary resting place. Xia Bai drove the battleship all the way around, and he really found it. However, at this moment, Xia Bai saw the building from a distance, and his battleship suddenly sounded the alarm again. Your fuel is seriously low. Current fuel remaining 0%. Xia Bai, Zhao Ko, it's already 0% and you remind me that there is a salted duck egg for it. However, this was actually Xia Bai's negligence. The fuel display screen was on one side and he just didn't notice it. The reason why he didn't notice it was because Xia Bai remembered that he had filled up the car with gas when he first entered the gas station. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have run out of gas so quickly. But Xia Bai was only confused for a moment before he realized, with a full tank of gas, a business car can certainly be driven for a long time, but a battleship obviously consumes more fuel than a business car. Xia Bai Guan thought that he had filled up the tank, but ignored this. Even though Xia Bai is a veteran driver of the Doomsday, there are times when the car overturns. Please vote for recommendation. Please collect it. Asking for all kinds of support. Dear book lovers, it is not easy to write a new book, so please support me. Chapter 2019. Chapter 2019. Only then did Xia Bai think that the battleship had overturned. No, to be precise, it capsized. When he was still about 100 meters away from the large shopping mall, his battleship suddenly lost all power and went down. Everyone in the battleship suddenly panicked and let out a series of screams. Xia Bai was still calm. At the last moment, he successfully switched back to the form of a battleship and turned it into the form of a commercial vehicle with 4 wheels. From top to bottom, it landed steadily on the ground without any real impact. Turn over with a click. The front bumper hit the ground hard. Hao Zuang and others were amazed for a while at the operation of the battleship turning back into a commercial vehicle. At this moment, they might have forgotten that they were in the middle of the apocalypse and were completely in awe of Xia Bai's battleship. Xia Bai was not in the mood to marvel because the system prompts kept ringing in his mind like a reminder. Warning, your battleship has been damaged to 80%. Please dock immediately for repairs. Warning, you. Xia Bai couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He also wanted to repair it, but at the moment, his battleship was not at a high enough level to repair it while it was in use. He could only repair it in a completely unactivated state. Of course, if he could, after upgrading to level 5 or 6, he will be able to repair while driving. But now is not the time to park, because they are still at least 100 meters away from the home furnishings supermarket. They can walk there, but leaving the battleship here will definitely not work. Baylan asked at this time, what's wrong? Although she was shot, her voice was still unusually calm. Although she didn't speak loudly, she drowned out the voices of Hao Zhuang and others. Only then did Hao Zhuang and the others realize that, although this battleship was magical, they had obviously not landed safely just now, but had fallen from the sky. Something was obviously wrong. Guys like Hao Zhuang are definitely not smart enough in the apocalypse. They may have a certain ability to survive, but if they really encounter something big, they will have to finish it off. Compared with this, Baylan actually has an amazing calmness and rationality. However, Xia Bai does not dislike Hao Zhuang and the others. On the contrary, he likes such guys very much. Such people are at least credible. In a team of ability users, if they were all downright smart people, not only would it not be a lucky thing, but it would be the most terrifying situation. On the contrary, Xia Bai felt that these few of them were in a good situation as survivors. Hao Zhuang and others may be a little dull, but they can still help at critical moments. When doing other things, Xia Bai can also discuss with Baylan, who is relatively rational and calm. Only a team composed of such a group of people can achieve some real unity. Even in the end of the world, people can live in many ways. Being selfish and killing people is not necessarily the best way to survive. Xia Bai was lucky enough to join such a team in his previous life. It was a team composed of a group of brothers and their families from the same gym. Although it was in the apocalypse, it was still warm and fun. Xia Bai wanted to completely integrate into them, but unfortunately not long after Xia Bai joined, that team was plotted by another team, and was eaten directly. Some people say that trust and friends are meaningless in the end of the world, but others say that only trust and friends can help you go further in the end of the world. Out of gas. As Xia Bai said that, he had already dug out the gasoline that had been prepared, opened the door, and jumped out of the car. As Xia Bai expected, there were almost no zombies in the home mall. Of course, there were not all zombies at all. Xia Bai looked around and saw a dozen zombies from far and near, but these zombies were different from the previous terrifying zombies. Compared with the Tide, of course it is nothing. Although this is also a large shopping mall, the doomsday breaks out at midnight. As a home furnishing mall, it is impossible to open the door at night. No matter how popular it is, there will be no people. Naturally, there will not be many zombies gathering here. Plus, here it's not too far away from the highway. Even if there are any zombies, they have already been attracted, and there will be fewer zombies left here. Of course, despite this, several zombies discovered Xia Bai and the others immediately. They moved their footsteps, shook their broken bodies, and walked directly towards Xia Bai. However, the nearest zombie was still at least 10 meters away from Xia Bai. Xia Bai didn't have to rush to deal with this group of people. He could just refuel the car first. At this time, Hao Zhuang jumped out of the commercial vehicle with a fire axe and stood next to Xia Bai, saying, "Come on, I don't know how, but don't worry, boss, if there are zombies coming to cause trouble, I will chop them to death." Xia Bai glanced at him, a little surprised, but also a little warm in his heart. At that moment, he lowered his head and cheered, saying, "Stop calling you boss, boss. Strictly speaking, I still call you senior. From now on, just call me Xia Bai." Why don't you hug your thigh? If you don't call me boss, how can you be so embarrassed to hug your thigh? Hao Zhuang touched his head and smiled honestly. Xia Bai was a little dizzy. "Is this why you call me boss?" Before Xia Bai could complain, Hao Zhuang suddenly said, "Boss, someone seems to be coming." Xia Bai turned around and took a look when he heard this, and indeed saw someone running towards their direction. Judging from her figure, she seemed to be a little girl. And the direction the other party came from was coming from the home store. So are they the survivors who have been hiding there for a long time? Xia Bai thought for a while, stood up, opened the door of the commercial vehicle, and said to the people inside, "There are survivors here. I'll let you get into my car," and recognized you as my companions. But I think I should talk about it now. You should all have seen what my car looks like. It's not an ordinary thing. It's my secret. Of course, it's obviously your secret too. So, I hope you don't tell anyone about my car, because once others know about it, it may mean great danger to all of us. The end of the world is only 2 days away. The world and people today are. You should also know what the situation is. When others find out about this car, it may push all of us to death. Therefore, I will be the first to say something ugly. If anyone does that, I will be the first to kill him. Of course, if we can help each other, we may not be able to live well. After Xia Bai's words came to light, everyone was silent for a moment, and then they all echoed point. Whether this endorsement is sincere or not, I'm afraid it will take time to judge. Chapter 30 The Awakener. Chapter 30 The Awakener. It's really a girl who came from the home furnishing mall. The other person was probably in his 20s, carrying a boning knife, wearing a miniskirt and a bra wrapped up her body, and looked extremely capable. Moreover, this guy has a good figure, his skin color is very healthy, and he is very strong. He ran over from a distance, more than 100 meters away, and he ran over in a short time. At this time, Xia Bai refueled his battleship. He turned around and saw the girl cutting down a zombie very neatly, and then ran in front of Xia Bai's business car. She first glanced at the shabby old car, then frowned and said, "You still want such an old shabby car? Come with me quickly and get back to the house before more zombies come." Everyone in the car now knows that this business car is not just a business car. Therefore, no matter how reasonable the girl's words are, everyone is clinging to the car and staying motionless. Abandon the car? Impossible. That is absolutely impossible. The girl was a little speechless. What time of day it is now? You can find any good car on the road. Okay, refueling. Xia Bai interrupted the girl. She stood up, clapped her hands and said, "Ha, it can drive now anyway. Instead of running over, it's better to just drive over." With that said, he got into the car directly. Seeing this, the girl could only sigh and climb into the car. However, after getting in the car, she took another look at the messy supplies on the ground. The entire battleship had been severely shaken before, and the supplies piled up were basically scattered. "Oh, I asked you why you don't want to abandon the car. It turns out there is something in the car." This guy didn't seem to see the battleship form of Xia Bai's car before. Xia Bai glanced at this guy, stepped on the accelerator, drove forward, and said, "You are a survivor in the home mall. Well, my name is Zukaokyo. What do you call me?" "Xia Bai." Xia Bai's response was concise and to the point. "Xia Bai, I've never heard of it." Zukaokyo immediately turned her head and looked at the other people in the car with a pleading look. Xia Bai didn't stop him either. It just so happened that he also took this opportunity to recognize the person. Although the people in this car were all students who rushed out of school with Xia Bai basically knew them, but he didn't know their names. Yet. Hao Zuan was the first to introduce himself. Then came the lean boy, who seemed a little shy at the moment, Chen Xiansheng. Then there was another boy. The boy was gentle and had black rimmed eyes. He looked like the kind of guy who was good at studying. At this moment, Chen Xiansheng, who was acting bankrupt, looked much more generous, saying, "Li Jinggyang." Zukaokyo nodded and looked around the entire commercial vehicle. However, the commercial vehicle is currently in camouflage form, and the damage degree of the battleship has exceeded 80%. The commercial vehicle also looks like it is about to fall apart. In addition to the supplies on the ground, Zukaokyo can't see anything. Whatever comes out. Next are the three girls. The tallest girl spoke first. "My name is Yang Xin." Another girl with freckles said, "Leaking." The last one to introduce himself was Bailan. Her expression was not good, and her voice was a little weak, but her words were still clear and steady. "Bailan, Zu." Kaokyo had long noticed Bailan in the corner and the gunshot wound on her arm, and asked casually, "Is that a gunshot wound?" Lan gave a faint hum, then leaned back slightly and closed his eyes, obviously not wanting to talk. Bailan himself has an iceberg temperament that repels people from thousands of miles away. Now with this kind of expression, it is even more difficult for people to talk to him. Zukaokyo smacked her lips, turned to Xia Bai, and said, "Did you come from the highway over there?" Xia Bai nodded. Zukaokyo snorted and said, "Did something happen over there? Last night I heard the explosion several miles away. The whole world seemed to be shaken." "Wow, it's true," I said. "What kind of military force is this?" "The way out of the city, controlled by Fang, is absolutely impossible to be safe. You are lucky too. You can survive such a big explosion. Xia Bai did not answer the question, but asked, how many people are there over there? When Zukio heard this, she was a little wary and said, why do you ask this? Xia Bai glanced at her and said, nothing. I want to ask if you have a doctor over there. My friend was shot and needs to be treated. No. Zukio shook her head and said, to tell you the doctor, we only have one tooth extraction person there. If you believe him, you may be able to pull out the bullet like a tooth. Oh, let me tell you, that sister is probably dead. Everyone knows what the situation is now. She was shot. No matter where she was hit, most likely it will be inflammation and infection in the end. Without zombies, she will die sooner or later. Zukio has a good figure and exquisite length, but her words are very vicious. When Hao Zuan and others heard this, they all showed a little anger. Beilan, on the other hand, was still sitting in the corner with a calm look and no expression at all, but her face was getting paler. Xia Bai knew that Beilan's injury could not be delayed. At this time, the business car had arrived in front of Zijia's shopping mall. Zukio stretched out a hand, pointed not far away and said, over there, the underground parking lot. Hearing this, Xia Bai turned on the high beam and drove the car directly in. The underground parking lot here was relatively empty. After Xia Bai parked the car, he saw a dozen men walking towards the other side of the parking lot. They were all between the ages of 20 and 40, carrying all kinds of things in their hands. Things are covered from 3 directions. Zukio waited for the car to stop, then jumped out of the car and ran to the leading middle-aged man in a plaid shirt over there and said, it's in stock. The middle-aged man's eyes lit up slightly. He looked at a few people around him, came to Xia Bai's car, and said, my Kyo Deming, I used to be quite famous in this area. I thought you might not know me, but it doesn't matter. I'm a reasonable person. Brother, we are all survivors, and we should help each other. Since you have come to my land, you should help. But, we are here. There is a rule. All survivors who want to join us should share all their supplies. We share supplies. If nothing else, I will never lose anything to you. I just share it with everyone, so that everyone can live a better life. Yes or no? As he spoke, the guy lightly stomped his foot on the ground. At that moment, the ground beneath his feet was cracked by his gentle kick. Xia Bai's pupils contracted. This guy is an awakener. Brothers, please collect and recommend. Chapter 31 Battleship Repair. Chapter 31 Battleship Repair. The power of Kyo Deming's kick appeared in everyone's eyes, and everyone's expression changed. Xia Bai glanced at Beilan, who was sitting at the back, took a deep breath, opened the door directly, and stood in front of the awakened man without fear behind him. Hao Zuan looked hesitant to speak. He knew that the boss was powerful, but Beilan was also an awakened person. Hao Zuan was very aware of the power of the awakened person. When the car crashed before, Beilan forcibly pulled the entire bus. That scene is still deeply imprinted in his mind. Therefore, even if the boss is a boss, Xia Bai has only an ordinary person's physique, and he may not be able to benefit from facing an awakened person at such a close distance. However, Xia Bai didn't seem to consider this danger at all. He took out the Type 92 from his waist in front of Kyo Deming, opened his mouth in front of the man, and said, we won't stay here for a long time. We will only stay for a while. He said this, paused slightly, and a stern look flashed in his eyes, and said, my friend was shot and needs emergency treatment. I have been delayed for a long time before, and now I don't want to waste any more time on anything. Xia Bai lowered the muzzle of the gun slightly, and the flashing light in his eyes was already very clear. If you want to entangle, I will do it. Kyo Deming looked at Xia Bai in front of him, and at the gun in his hand. His eyes narrowed dangerously, and he remained silent. Xia Bai didn't speak. He looked at Kyo Deming in front of him with a heavy gaze, showing no intention of giving in. Beilan's injury cannot be delayed, and he will not give away the supplies in the car to anyone. This is different from the previous situation in the gas station. At that time, those supplies were originally not wanted by Xia Bai, but now, if he so-called shares the current supplies, they will eat what? What to survive on? Hao Zuang silently jumped out of the car and stood behind Xia Bai, followed closely by Chen Qianxing and Li Jinggyang. Even the two girls also got out of the car and stood behind Xia Bai. Bailan, who was sitting in the car, looked at this scene and opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she didn't say anything. She just smiled silently. After a moment, Kyle Deming laughed. He stretched out his hand, patted Xia Bai on the shoulder and said, "College student." Xia Bai still didn't let down his guard. His body was tense and ready for action at any time point. Just as Hao Zhuang thought, Xia Bai could not be an opponent of an awakened person. At such a close distance, Xia Bai was not sure that he would shoot the opponent before he broke his neck, but what he could guarantee was that if he really takes action, this guy won't be able to live easily. Therefore, he just said a faint HMM. Kao Deming glanced at Hao Zhuang and others who looked very nervous, then glanced at Xia Bai, smiled, and said, "College student, TSK, college student." Alas, I was also an ignorant college student. Many years ago. Since you guys don't understand at all, you don't plan to join us, and we won't want your things. Don't get me wrong. We have no other intentions. We just thought you wanted to join us. I think you can understand. After all, when everyone gets together, people with everyone hiding, it won't be long before trouble breaks out. As he said that, he nodded directly to Xia Bai and said, "You should pay more attention to the gunshot wound. The reality is not as good as the situation in the movie. Deal with it quickly. If you need anything, you can ask me directly." As he said that, he turned around and led the group of people back and soon went upstairs through the passage of the underground garage. At this time, Xia Bai and the others exhaled slightly. Over there, after confirming that she had disappeared from the sight of Xia Bai and others, Tsukio Kyo couldn't help it. She came to Kyo Deming and said, "Old Kyo, we just give up like that." Kyo Deming said, "What else can we do? They don't want to join our gang, and we are not robbers." Kyo Kyo smacked her lips and said, "They are just a group of college students. If they don't follow us, it will be difficult for them to survive, right?" When Kyo Deming heard this, he shook his head and said, "College student? Apart from anything else, I can guarantee that the one holding the gun is definitely not a college student. Just the way he holds the gun, the action of loading the gun, and the fierce energy, is a veteran who has definitely killed people. I have also been in the army before. I'm sure that he is a real ruthless person. If we really take action, we may not be able to get any good results. We are not short of supplies in the first place. How many people are sacrificed for this kind of thing? Do you think it's worth it?" Tsukio Kyo was stunned for a moment, silent for a moment, but fell silent. At the same moment, in the underground parking lot. After Kyo Deming and others left Xia Bai's sight, he took action. As Kyo Deming said, gunshot wounds are no joke, especially in the current extremely poor medical environment. He must treat Bailan's injuries as soon as possible. As a veteran who has been in the apocalypse for 5 years, Xia Bai has already mastered the art of medical treatment. However, his methods in this area have always been simple and crude, and he has no professional qualities. This is why he asked Tsukio before. It just so happened that they didn't have a doctor here. In Xia Bai's opinion, it would be best if he could find a professional doctor. If he couldn't find one, he would have to do it himself. Of course, before that, Xia Bai had one more thing to do. He took Bailan out of the car, then asked everyone to get out of the car. He immediately turned off the commercial vehicle battleship completely, and then said to the system in his heart, "The battleship has begun the repair process. Dear Captain, do you want to start repairing your current second level battleship?" "Yes, the repair process has begun. The energy points required to repair the damage to the battleship are being calculated. It is expected to cost 67 energy points. Repair in progress. Please wait. Estimated repair completion time: 3 hours and 51 minutes. The time it takes to repair the warship is longer than Xia Bai's previous process of upgrading the warship. During the repair process of the battleship, it will not be completely wrapped in light like it was during the previous upgrade. Instead, it will complete self-repair bit by bit in silence. At that moment, they directly supported Bailan into the security room on the other side, and Xia Bai officially began to prepare to treat Xia Bai's wounds. Hao Zhuang and others wanted to stay and observe. They were really impressed by Xia Bai. The boss not only had strong survivability, he could also deal with gunshot wounds. However, Bailan spoke up now and kicked all these people out. Xia Bai could see that this girl was surprisingly a little embarrassed. Chapter 32 Xia Bai's plan. Chapter 32 Xia Bai's plan. Time passed bit by bit, and Bailan was stronger than Xia Bai had imagined. During the process of taking out the bullet, her expression was cold and silent, with only a slight frown expressing the pain she felt. Although Xia Bai didn't have any professional skills in this area, he was still very skilled. It didn't take long for him to take the bullet out of the girl's arm, and then apply medicine and bandage. Before the end, one of the important supplies that Xia Bai collected was medicine and related medical supplies, so there was still plenty of supplies. Bailan looked at Xia Bai and said, "If Xiao Deming didn't retreat just now, are you really planning to defeat the enemy?" Xia Bai was stunned for a moment and said, "Why do you ask this suddenly?" "Nothing, just curious, huh?" Xia Bai said with a smile, "I said that I want to die, but I don't want to die that much. The other party probably has the same idea. Although the home mall sells furniture, it also has restaurants, food, etc. They will definitely not be lacking, so it is unlikely that we will fight to the death. So I knew at that time that it was unlikely that the other party would take action, unless it was a stupid green iron-headed kid." Bailan thought for a while and said, "What if they are really iron-headed boys and dumb-headed green people who just don't retreat?" Xia Bai shrugged and said, "Then I have no choice but to give away the supplies. After all, if the supplies are gone, you can still find them, but if the people are gone, there will be nothing." Bailan said, "It's been 3 days since the end of the world, and this is the first time I've heard of this theory." Xia Bai smiled. "He really has no shortage of supplies. Not to mention that it is the beginning of the end and there are supplies everywhere. Even if there are no supplies outside, he can still produce supplies through his own warships. He will definitely not starve to death." Therefore, Xia Bai is really not that enthusiastic about materials, but after a moment, Bailan said quietly, "Thank you." This made Xia Bai stunned. Bailan didn't answer at this moment. Xia Bai completely helped her deal with the injury and said with a smile, "The physique of the awakened person is extremely strong, and the recovery ability is far beyond ordinary people. An injury of this level can be completely recovered in up to 3 days. If anyone wants to say who hopes Bailan gets better soon, it is of course Xia Bai. Now is the beginning of the apocalypse. Zombies are everywhere, and the city is in crisis. Although Hao Zhuang and the others can help, the real leader in combat power is Bailan, the awakened one. When Bailan regains his combat ability, plus Xia Bai, a veteran of the Doomsday, and Hao Zhuang and others to help, although there are not many in number, they will definitely be the strongest among the survivors in the early days of the Doomsday, and they can completely go sideways. The battleship is still being repaired, so everyone can only stay in the security room. The freckled girl leaking seems a little nervous. We told Xiao Deming before that we would leave in a while. If we continue to stay here, obviously, she was worried that those people would cause trouble again. Xia Bai shook his head and was about to explain, but Bailan already said, "Don't worry, they didn't take action before, and they won't come to us again in the future. Although they said that, if we continue to stay here, they will also. I just turn a blind eye and pretend not to see." Xia Bai nodded and said, "Don't worry, Xiao Deming and the others. We'll sleep here for the night and we'll talk about the rest tomorrow." Although Xiao Deming and the others intend to stay here for a long time, Xia Bai has no intention of staying here for a long time in the home furnishing store. The reason is very simple. It is too close to the highway, and there are all zombies there, and even a zombie wave has formed. When the military withdraws, there will be nothing to attract zombies, and those zombies will definitely scatter around, and sooner or later they will gather here. The zombies spawned by this alien virus have a sense of smell more sensitive than that of a dog, and can even smell the breath of a living person from a kilometer away. In a place like Home Mall, there are no obvious things that can be used for defense. And there are not too many survivors and weapons. Once the zombies come, they will definitely be doomed, so Xia Bai has no plans to stay here for a long time. Just as he thought when he drove the battleship out of the exploding gas station. He was just looking for a safe place to stay. After hearing Xia Bai and Baolan's explanations, everyone was slightly relieved and temporarily relieved. Baolan looked at Xia Bai and said, "Then, what are we going to do next?" This is not only a problem for Baolan, but also a problem for everyone present. At this moment, everyone turned their heads and looked at Xia Bai, looking forward to Xia Bai's next plan. Most of the survivors of the doomsday are as panicked as headless flies. They don't know what they should do or how to do it correctly. In this situation, no matter whether you are a smart person or a fool, you can't guarantee that you can make the right choice and judgment. Most of the time, what you need to rely on is the evil, damn luck. Since the end of the world, Xia Bai has been playing the role of guide for everyone, calmly analyzing the situation and choosing the way forward. Therefore, when this situation comes, everyone almost instinctively looks to Xia Bai, wanting to hear Xia Bai's thoughts from the perspective of Hao Zhuang and others. This is the case, but from Xia Bai's perspective, he is a reborn person. If he can't even make this plan, his previous life will be in vain. Of course, Xia Bai was actually a little depressed. After all, his plan to follow the army out of the city on the highway actually failed. He left the city very late in his last life, and he was like a headless fly in the early stage. He had never even encountered the army. It was only later that he heard that the military had successfully evacuated a large number of survivors through several main roads in the early days of the end, but didn't know what the twists and turns were, so Xia Bai almost got herself involved. However, this time Xia Bai learned his lesson. He said, "I'll listen to the military's radio broadcast before. It seems that they are going to establish an initial survivor base in Bingcheng prison. So, I think our next step is to go there. Of course, we won't take the highway this time. Let's go by ourselves, to a place with fewer people and fewer zombies." Hao Zhuang, I have been listening to the military's radio broadcasts. Why didn't I hear the news? The words he heard on the radio were of course Xia Bai's, but he didn't say anything. He just sat back on his chair and closed his eyes slightly. There is still 1 hour left before the battleship repair is completed. I want to review the battleship rights agreement, as Xia Bai thought silently in his heart. Soon, a display screen invisible to others appeared in front of his eyes, which was densely filled with small characters. It is not easy to write a new book. Book lovers who like this book also hope that you can collect it, vote for recommendation, etc. I would like to thank you for your support. Chapter 33 Battleship Authority Agreement. Chapter 33 Battleship Authority Agreement. The Warship Authority Agreement mainly contains the relevant contents and terms for the captain to allocate warship authority point. Although Xia Bai's current second level battleship is still small in scale, if he can successfully continue to upgrade it, this battleship will eventually become a behemoth, and it is not impossible to even completely rise into the sky. Although the warship will have an autonomous operating system in the future, with the upgrade and the increase of various built-in modules in the warship, autonomous operation will eventually have its limitations, and it is impossible for Xia Bai to control it alone. In other words, this battleship needs crew after all. If Xia Bai wants others to help him operate the battleship more completely, the captain must delegate the use rights of various functions, so that others can operate certain modules in the battleship. As for the issuance of permissions, Xia Bai, as the captain, can set the usage time and cancellation conditions of the permissions. For example, once the authority holder launches an attack on the captain or other crew members or even performs unfavorable operations on the battleship, his or her authority will be automatically revoked. As a captain, Xia Bai can also use this authority anytime, anywhere, unconditionally of recovery. In addition, this battleship system also has a crew recruitment function, but it can only be opened after the battleship reaches level 7. Xia Bai carefully browsed through the agreement on the battleship's authority, and found that, although the captain could delegate authority, the captain's control over the battleship was still at the supremacy level. Even if others had obtained higher authority, they wanted to use this to shake Xia Bai's position as captain is impossible. After all, Xia Bai is the owner of the battleship and the owner of the system, just like the boss of a 5-star hotel. The crew members recruited are just part-time workers, and those who are only given authority by Xia Bai are temporary workers. In other words, in this system, apart from the boss, there are only two types of work, wage earners and temporary workers. Given these two types of work, it is impossible to overthrow the boss and annex the hotel point. When Xia Bai thought about this, he always felt like he was like a wealthy landlord who wanted to start a great life path that squeezed the labor force. However, all of this is in vain until the battleship level increases. Now Xia Bai's battleship only has level 2, and it only has 8 or 9 people aboard. What kind of battleship do you want? At this point, Xia Bai no longer thought about it, but exhaled and shook his head. Point. If there is a book, it will be long. If there is no book, it will be short. Point. As time passed, the battleship was quickly repaired, but from the outside, the battleship still looked shabby, like an old car that had been used for more than 10 years. 67 energy points were spent to repair the battleship, and Xia Bai still had a full 310 energy points left. Point. There was no one around in the underground garage, and there were no zombies. Xia Bai proudly spent 3 energy points to get 6 kilograms of beef, set up his old rice cooker, and started cooking meat. Point. How Xuan was shocked when he saw the 6 pounds of bloody raw beef that Xia Bai brought out. Boss, where did you get this? It can't be human flesh, right? Xia Bai was speechless for a while and said, "Gung gung gun, don't eat human flesh." How? Xuan rubbed his hands and said with a smile, "It's not okay if I don't eat." Xia Bai directly set up the pot and started cooking the meat. However, the girls dug out a bunch of condiments that Xia Bai didn't even notice and put them in the pot. Suddenly, the meat cooked and clear water immediately started to taste. Point. Xia Bai also twitched his index finger, but now he had a dark face and said, "Who brought condiments that are useless and take up space? Bringing a bunch of condiments is worse than getting a few salted duck eggs." Everyone looked at each other. No one dared to say a word. Point. Xia Bai could only silently take out a box of kefir and look at the beef in the pot. Point. He hadn't eaten beef for who knows how long. Point. In the 5 years of the apocalypse, things like beef were only available to the bosses or high-ranking officials in the survivor base. For people like Xia Bai who were struggling in the apocalypse, it was good to have food to eat, let alone beef. Point. At the beginning of his rebirth, Xia Bai spent all his time making preparations and did not look for a place to have a big meal. Now, this was the first time he had eaten beef in the past few years. Although there was no expression on his face, but he was also very excited in his heart. Point. With the battleship manufacturing facilities, Xia Bai believed that the day of eating meat every day was not far away. Point. This is Xia Bai's small goal in life that he has no pursuit of. Point. However, while they were eating meat here, Xia Bai did not let it sit idle on the other side of the battleship. Point. 310 energy points. This can be said to be the most energy points Xia Bai has had since his last days. However, upgrading from a 2nd level battleship to a 3rd level battleship requires a full 1000 energy points for modification and upgrade. Point. After the battle at the gas station, Xia Bai's strategic supplies were almost exhausted. There were a lot of pistol bullets left, but other items were much consumed. Point. The freezing bombs were directly used, and there were only a dozen rounds of 30mm caliber machine gun bullets left, all of which needed to be replenished. Point. Xia Bai directly ordered the construction of 3 freezing bombs and 250 rounds of cannon bullets. This cost Xia Bai 80 energy points, and after that, he spent another 30 energy points to use the battleship to build the first rifle M401 and 100 rounds of 5.56mm caliber bullets. Then, he got another Type 92 pistol, so he had 3 pistols in his hand. Point. Xia Bai planned to keep 1 pistol for himself and give the remaining 2 to Hao Zhuang and the others. Although firearms are very unfamiliar to college students, if you want to survive in the apocalypse, this is something you must learn to master sooner or later. In the end, Xia Bai left 100 energy points as deposits and backup. Point. In addition to those things, Xia Bai also created an extreme virus inhibitor. Point. It was an injection filled with blue translucent liquid, which looked like a dream. Point. This thing can temporarily suppress the impact of the alien zombie virus on humans, but as soon as the effect of the drug wears off, unless another injection of this drug is injected, they will still be infected and turn into zombies. to create a tube of extreme virus inhibitor, but it requires a full 50 energy points. Xia Bai worked hard all the way and only got so many energy points, but Xia Bai still built this thing. At least it was prepared. If something happened and he was bitten, he could still use this thing to survive for a while. Point of course, if Xia Bai is really bitten by then, but there is no follow-up extreme virus inhibitor to keep up, it will be no different from waiting to die. It will just change from mutating immediately to waiting to die. Dear book lovers, please collect, recommend, vote and reward. Chapter 34, The Road Out of the City. Chapter 34, Traffic Blocker. At noon the next day, Xia Bai left the home store as promised. Zukio squatted on the edge of the windowsill on the second floor, watching the shabby business car drive out of the underground garage, and said to herself very strangely, their cars are like that, but they can still drive. In the direction of the highway in the distance, there were still sporadic gunshots. It seemed that the military personnel were still in a stalemate with the zombies, but at this time, Xia Bai had already learned a lesson and no longer planned to go to the military. Instead, he planned to bypass the highway, leave the city from a less crowded place, and go to the ice through the wilderness. City jail. Of course, Xia Bai also knew that, although there were not many human zombies in the wilderness, the possibility of encountering other special zombies increased, and the level of danger was not necessarily that low. It's October 2118 and the weather is getting cold. Xia Bai's plan was to spend the winter at the survivor base of Ice City Prison. According to Xia Bai's memory, the survivor base in Bingcheng Prison has existed for more than 8 months. In other words, it is feasible for him to stay here until tomorrow's spring enlightenment. Winter is the most dangerous time. Xia Bai had a deep understanding of it in his previous life. He didn't want to run around in winter in this life. Moreover, through his time at the survivor base of Ice City Prison, Xia Bai also planned to upgrade the battleship to level 3. When a battleship reaches level 3, it will have more combat modules and even a rudimentary medical module. It will also have the ability to take off and fly, becoming a real ship. This alien zombie virus is extremely powerful. It is not just as simple as producing zombies. As time goes by, this virus will cause deeper changes in the zombies, spawning more extreme mutants, and even some smart zombies come out. Yes, this alien zombie virus may even give birth to intelligent zombies. In Xia Bai's memory, intelligent zombies first appeared in 2119 and gradually increased in number. By 2121, this kind of zombies will become the main pressure of the major survivor bases. This kind of intelligent zombies are no different from other zombies. They still have an incredible desire for flesh and blood and living people. This desire is even beyond their original wisdom. The extent to which it can be controlled. This is exactly the purpose of the existence of this alien zombie virus, to create a biological cluster that is extremely antagonistic to humans and give them the possibility of evolution, so as to cause the greatest blow to human civilization. In the end, the Shengjing survivor base where Xia Bai was located was breached for 3 reasons: the power struggle among internal human survivors, the serious shortage of combat personnel caused by the depopulation of the 5-year doomsday population, and another point, the large number of such losses. However, it will be at least a year before intelligent zombies appear. If Xia Bai can upgrade the battleship to level 3 before the advent of 2019 and have a spaceship across the sky at the beginning of the end of the world, he will be the first to be invincible. In addition, Xia Bai went to Bingcheng Prison for another purpose. He was going to find an acquaintance. The commercial vehicle was speeding through the streets of Bingcheng when he encountered scattered zombies. Xia Bai directly lowered the window and raised his hand to kill them with one shot. Even though this is already the edge of the city, there are still a lot of zombies standing swaying in the streets and alleys, howling and shooing them out of the shadows of the alleys the moment Xia Bai and his business car roared past. But if there weren't many, they would be knocked down by Xia Bai on the spot. But if there were more, Xia Bai would just step on the accelerator and rush all the way, leaving the zombies behind. And if they meet other survivors, if they can help, Xia Bai will get out of the car and help. If they can't help, Xia Bai will not meddle in their own business, and along the way, if he encounters any pharmacies, commodity stores, etc., as long as there is a chance, Xia Bai will still get out of the car and search to see if there is anything that can be used, and then directly move it into his car battleship point. At the same time, Xia Bai was basically producing half of the things he made through the battleship. And he immediately started to make gold point. When we arrived at the survivor base of Ice City Prison, gold was also one of the hard currencies, and using the battleship manufacturing facilities to create gold was extremely cost effective. In the battleship manufacturing list, gold was an elemental mineral, and was classified in a pile. Among the mineral materials, the cost of these minerals is the same. According to the system classification, they are all ordinary mineral materials. They are all 2 kilograms per energy point. They are absolutely high quality and low price point. Gold is rare and special on the earth, so it is sold at a high price, but in the universe, it is just an ordinary mineral. Therefore, the system's pricing of gold is no different from ordinary mineral materials. This was a bargain for Xia Bai. He spent 10 energy points to create 20 kilograms of gold. Before the end of the world, that would be equivalent to more than 2 million. Xia Bai thought to himself, if there was no doomsday, wouldn't I be rich in minutes? However, the current 20 kilograms of gold is enough for Xia Bai to become a rich man in the Ice City survivor base. In the early days of the apocalypse, although the value of gold has almost become the same as bread, it is still valuable. In another 2 to 3 years, the value of gold will only be even lower, so, without anyone knowing, a crazy doomsday gold hoarder was born. After stumbling along the way, although Xia Bai's speed was not slow, it still took him nearly an hour to leave the city point. During this period, Xia Bai almost met an extreme mutant head-on. Fortunately, the opponent was launching a fierce attack on another group of survivors at that time. With the previous battle at the gas station, Xia Bai's battleship actually fought with the extreme mutant. He was physically capable of fighting, but in a real fight, Xia Bai wouldn't be able to fare well. Therefore, he withdrew decisively with the thought of death to fellow Taoists, not to death to poor Taoists. Although, you can get 100 energy points by dealing with an extreme mutant, this method is not as reliable as hunting 100 zombies. Xia Bai would not stand by and watch survivors who could help him, but for this kind of situation, he would simply choose to run away. At that moment, Xia Bai turned around and turned his business car into a small road on the other side. This place was close to the edge of the city. Most of the buildings were low, but they were built in a mess, leaving the extreme mutants behind. He just turned around an alley and plunged into a pile of zombies. It was originally a group of zombies gathered under a small apartment building. Xia Bai bumped in and became the target of this group of zombies. Please collect it. Asking for all kinds of support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35. You're welcome. You're welcome. Chapter 35. You're welcome. You're welcome. Almost instantly, a zombie jumped in front of Xia Bai's car, lay down on the hood, opened its bloody mouth, and bit into the glass. It was as fierce as a beast. There are emergencies everywhere in the apocalypse, and turning around and bumping into a zombie is just a small incident, so Xia Bai was still very calm. He immediately stuck the muzzle of his gun out of the car window and killed the zombie with one shot. But Balan let out a scream at this moment because a zombie was rushing from the side and bit Xia Bai's outstretched arm with its teeth and claws. Balan picked up the fire axe that Hao Zhuang had put aside and struck the zombie on the head with the axe. Her strength was so great that she opened the zombie with force, and the axe was deeply embedded in the zombie's head. Balan then let go of the zombie's head, and the zombie hit the ground behind him with the fire axe. At this moment, Xia Bai had already put the reverse gear on and drove the car back at high speed into the narrow alley behind. As Xia Bai retreated rapidly, the sound of engines and gunshots attracted all the zombies gathered at the door of the unit building in that community. These creatures let out terrifying howls and rushed towards Xia Bai's commercial vehicle and battleship. Rushed over. Hao Zhuang's miserable howl sounded in the commercial vehicle. Sister Balan, my fire axe. This Guy was sitting in a commercial car that was retreating at high speed, staring at the fire axe stuck in the zombie's head outside, with a look of pain on his face. Killing a zombie and throwing a fire axe at the same time would cause a loss of blood. At this moment, Chen and Cheng on the other side shouted, "It seems like someone ran out of the corridor over there." Xia Bai heard the words and took a look. Sure enough, as they attracted the zombies here, the 3 or 4 survivors who were originally trapped in the building took this opportunity to rush out and went directly to the building where they were parked. A black Santana got out of the car and drove quickly in the opposite direction to Xia Bai, and the other Xia Bai couldn't help but cursed these grandsons, but there was nothing he could do. Running into a zombie was just bad luck. However, he had no intention of reversing all the way out. When retreating into the middle of the alley, Xia Bai directly threw out a freezing bomb. As he continued to retreat, the freezing bomb exploded at the exact location. In an instant, the cold air rose, and a cold the frost spread instantly, freezing a large number of zombies that were crowded in the alley and chasing Xia Bai. In an instant, the alley was filled with ice sculptures. At this moment, Xia Bai put the car back into gear and pushed the accelerator to the bottom. In an instant, this commercial vehicle with battleship performance rushed out like a rocket, rushing through this zombie ice sculpture fiercely. Although the range of the freezing bomb is limited, its freezing ability is extremely strong, and it can completely freeze everything within its explosion range from the inside out in an instant. Now, with Xia Bai's sprint, these zombie ice sculptures were knocked to pieces by Xia Bai and rushed out of the alley. After Xia Bai shot and killed a few more zombies, the remaining ones it would be difficult for zombies to pose any threat to them. Xia Bai drove the car, picked up a box of yogurt, and drove out very leisurely. Bailan, Chen and Cheng and others were stunned. They didn't expect that the situation could be resolved so quickly. Hao Zuan, on the other hand, was lying on the back window and looking back. He was still a little sad that the fire axe that he had carried for many days was consumed by Bailan. Xia Bai drove onto the slightly larger road ahead, turned onto 2 streets, and stopped on a roadside with no zombies. As for why Xia Bai stopped, the reason was very simple: to eat. Bailan and others have followed Xia Bai these days and are about to develop the concept of eating well even in the last days. So no one thinks there is anything wrong at this moment. Xia Bai got off the car first, planning to find a safe place first. Soon, he found his target, which was a small shop on the other side of the street. Using this opportunity to eat, maybe we can also search for something. With this thought in mind, Xia Bai and Bailan said hello and walked directly over there. However, when he reached the door, Xia Bai noticed that there was someone inside. It was also a group of survivors, 3 or 4 people, rummaging through the supermarket. However, the size of this small shop was not large to begin with. It seemed that it had been looted by someone before, and there was basically nothing left to eat. Most of the rest were useless debris. The group of survivors rummaged around for a long time and only found a backpack of things. But when this group of people saw Xia Bai, they were very vigilant and cautious. One of the men even said, "Brother, we are searching here. You can go find another place." To be honest, Xia Bai really didn't like the trash here. Xia Bai was somewhat speechless about the eagerness to protect the calf of these guys. Xia Bai glanced at this guy and said, "Don't worry, I can't stand you for this little thing." The man snorted coldly, with an "I don't believe your nonsense" look on his face, but didn't say anything else. However, soon, this group of people realized that Xia Bai was not lying. Because soon, Hao Zuang and the others came over. This guy came over carrying 2 big bags of Master Kong braised beef noodles and a pile of beef sausages. When everyone saw the survivors who looked extremely vigilant inside, they all understood what he was. Instead of going in, they set up a pot outside the small shop and cooked instant noodles. The unique aroma of instant noodles quickly spread, exuding a charming allure. How many people have eaten something hot since the end of the world? Instant noodles were not a good thing before the apocalypse, but now, as the fragrance spreads, the gang searched the survivors in the supermarket and looked at some of the basically useless things that others had picked up after searching for a long time. Looking at the big pot of fragrant instant noodles and the sausage inside, they all started to swallow their saliva. For a moment, the man who just spoke took a step forward and said in a slightly gentle tone, "Well, brother, can you?" Xia Bai glanced at him, reached out and took out the gun from his waist and slapped it on the ground. Before the other party finished speaking, he said with a look of "I understand what you mean," and said with a hearty smile, "Yes, yes, we can go. We will leave after eating in a while. You plunder yours and don't leave anything for us. We don't have any ideas for you, so don't leave anything for us. Don't be polite, don't be polite, please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support." Chapter 36 I want to buy weapons. Chapter 36 I want to buy weapons. Chen Qianqing stood up. "Come on, brother Xia, I'll serve you a bowl." While serving Xia Bai noodles, he glanced at the man next to him, whose face had become a little stiff, and said with a smile, "You're welcome. Don't just watch us eat. Didn't you also search for supplies? Go there. You guys should hurry up and eat." The man's face became even more ugly but he looked at the gun in Xia Bai's hand and finally said nothing. He exchanged glances with his companions, then walked away dejectedly, started his car, and quickly disappeared. Here a side point. While Chen Qianqing was serving Xia Bai very seriously, he showed a very flattering smile to Xia Bai. "Brother Xia, can you still let me fly our spaceship next time?" "How?" Zhuang said. "Don't get close to the big boss." Xia Bai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He took a small bowl full of instant noodles from the other party's hand and ate without responding. To be honest, Xia Bai hasn't eaten instant noodles for a long time. Today, it tastes extremely delicious. Xia Bai's thoughts were a little wandering, and he was thinking about other things. Xia Bai owns a battleship, which is definitely his biggest asset to survive in this doomsday. Moreover, he knows that in the further future alien creatures will truly come and bring greater disaster to the human world. When that time comes, no matter he wants it or not, he will definitely confront the alien creatures. Although Xia Bai still doesn't know what those alien creatures want to do on Earth, one of their purposes is to killing all the people on Earth. Therefore, confrontation with them is almost inevitable. In his previous life, Xia Bai lived a miserable life. He had enough to eat for himself, and his whole family was not hungry, and he had been running for 5 years to survive. But in this life, from now on, he is already stronger than most ability users, and the power in his hands. Even if you own a battleship, if you want to survive, and even resist the terrifying alien creatures, you will definitely not be able to live in such a miserable state, like you did in your previous life. But Xia Bai doesn't want to turn his warship into Noah's Ark, nor does he want his warship to become an escape ship for survivors. He also doesn't want to turn himself into a savior who saves the world. He just wants to be himself, and then be himself. He will help the survivors who can help what he should do, and what he wants to do. After all, the more survivors there are, the more resources the Earth will be able to use. When alien creatures arrive in 5 years, the more effective forces there are to resist. But Xia Bai will not act like a holy mother Ashley. As long as there are risks and situations that are unfavorable to him, he will not take action. He wants to do things his own way. After finishing a steaming meal of instant noodles, everyone set off again. Xia Bai drove the car and left the city directly along the road in front of him. And just later today, the military actually released a broadcast about the Ice City prison survivor base. In the broadcast, they claimed that they had cleansed and renovated the Ice City prison and reinforced the construction of fortifications, allowing survivors in the Ice City area to gather near this area. Xia Bai remembered the road there very clearly, and he drove there all the way, which was considered smooth. Establish a survivor base in Ice City prison. Firstly, it has natural protection measures. Secondly, there are few zombies in this area, and it is not far or close to the city. It can continue to search for survivors and materials. If you take the expressway and the road is smooth, it will only take less than an hour to get here. Xia Bai took a detour from the expressway, wasting a lot of time, and arrived at the location of Bingcheng prison at dusk. Bingcheng prison covers an area of over 100,000 square meters. The outer circle is an administrative area, while the inner circle is the main structure of the prison, which consists of walls, electrified guardrails and razor wire. The military had started broadcasting throughout the region earlier today, so many survivors were attracted. Therefore, when we arrived in this area, the zombies that could be seen everywhere in the ice city almost disappeared, and the number of survivors increased again. Survivors from Bingcheng and even counties outside Bingcheng were gathering here, forming a long queue at the checkpoint set up in Bingcheng prison. Hao Zuan looked at the long motorcade in front of him and couldn't help complaining. It was jammed on the highway before, and it is jammed now. Really, in the apocalypse, will everything except escape be jammed? Xia Bai glanced at this guy and said, it's good to be stuck in traffic. When you go out for several kilometers and don't even see a living person, that's the real horror. Chen Xiansheng said, you can't see a living person after walking for several kilometers. Holding the grass, this is impossible. How? Zhuang said, there are no talented people for several kilometers. By then, no one will compete with us to grab supplies. Xia Bai did not say anything. What he told was the truth. In the late apocalypse of the previous life, it was a scene like this. Living people had become a scarce resource. Lone survivors wandering in the wild would even be happy to meet living people. But in the end, disputes often arise over material issues or even kill each other. Human beings are such contradictory and wonderful creatures. However, the reason why traffic is blocked here is actually due to security checks. The military must ensure that no one entering this survivor base is infected. Otherwise, once a zombie appears, the situation will be dangerous. But there are no zombies here, so despite the crowds, the atmosphere is quite peaceful. Moreover, Xia Bai also saw some vendors. They were some hidden survivors, wandering in the middle of the traffic, hiding from the military patrols, to maintain law and order, selling all kinds of things, ranging from snacks to daily necessities. One person even knocked on Xia's door. He looked out of the white car window and asked, brother, do you want to buy anything? I have bread, milk, medicine, sacred oil. You must buy something by all means. Let me tell you, the military's supplies are also tight. Once inside, but there is no such thing as military distribution of supplies, and the control is strict. If you don't have any reserves, you will either risk going to the city to find food, or you will spend high prices. Everything here is cheap. Xia Bai remembered clearly that the military in the survivor base of Bingcheng prison distributed certain supplies based on headcount every day. Although as time went by, the supplies distributed became less and less, but they did not stop. This guy is obviously out to deceive people. But Xia Bai knew that most of these dealers had been in there a long time ago and had connections there. Therefore, he thought about it and said, oh, really? I do have some things I want, but what you just said, these things are not what I want. The vendor was slightly startled and said, then what do you want to buy? Xia Bai smiled and said, are there any weapons or weapons? The tone of the protagonist's behavior has been completely set. Don't worry, everyone will not be a virgin. Then, continue to ask for collection and recommendation votes. It is not easy to create a new book. I also hope that the book lovers who like this book will support it. Chapter 37 Survivor Base. Chapter 37 Survivor Base. The hidden vendor was stunned for a moment. The smile on his face faded. He glanced at Xia Bai and said, do you know what you are talking about? Xia Bai smiled while holding the sour milk in his mouth and shook his head. The hawker's brows furrowed, and at a certain moment he even felt that Xia Bai was playing tricks on him. However, immediately after, Xia Bai threw him a small green post office bag directly from the car. The vendor was surprised. He took it and found it was heavy. He pulled open a corner of the bag and took a look. His expression suddenly changed. Inside was a piece of brilliant gold, which made his whole face shine. And the weight is at least a pound. He raised his head and looked at Xia Bai in front of him in shock. Xia Bai smiled and said, if you have what I want, you can come to me when I go back in. If you don't have it, if you can introduce me to relevant people, I can give you more reward. The vendor's face changed slightly and he said, is this for me? Xia Bai said, when you entrust someone to do something, you have to show some sincerity first, right? The hawker was indeed in a daze. Even if it was the end of the world, as long as he was lucky and brave, a poor man could get a lot of supplies or gold, but he just threw out a pound of gold as a stepping stone so casually. It was really the first time he saw it. Although the price of gold has dropped sharply now, it is still the early days of the apocalypse. Many people know that this thing is of little use, but they are willing to pay a lot of materials in exchange for it. A pound of gold is worth a lot of money. And just when he was in a daze, Xia Bai already said, "Of course, you can find a group of people to trouble me. They are all insignificant things, just more troublesome. So, if possible, I think we should try our best to comply with each other's requirements. If you give me channels to get what I want, I won't treat you badly." Xia Bai knew that he would take a certain risk by throwing away a pound of gold like this. However, in the Bingcheng prison survivor base, although the military did not control the weapons owned by individuals, a large amount of resold materials were still not allowed. It's allowed. 1 or 2 guns are fine, but if Xia Bai wants to get truly powerful and large volume weapons and equipment, he can only get them from the military and government. This is especially important for sellers. He was extremely cautious. Even if he wanted to sell, it would only be to a big benefactor or a well-known force. There were only 7 people on Xia Bai's side. If he didn't reveal that he had money first, it would be impossible for anyone to choose to sell to Xia Bai white weapons and equipment. Therefore, he used this method to open a path. Although he might take certain risks, it was undoubtedly a method that would get him what he wanted in the shortest possible time. Moreover, the security in Bingcheng prison is actually quite good. Xia Bai is a doomsday veteran and there is an awakened person by his side. I really don't think anyone here can pose a threat to them. Survivors who covet his gold cannot be too strong, and survivors who are too strong will not care about the gold from Xia Bai. The vendor hesitated for a moment, rolled up the post office bag, stuffed it into his own bag, and said, "Sir, what's your surname?" Xia Bai. The peddler nodded and said, "Wait for me to find you." With that said, he directly raised his hood to cover his face, and walked away looking around. Bailan, who was sitting in the passenger seat, was a little surprised and said, "You want to buy military weapons? How?" Zhuang and others were more curious. Where did Xia Bai get the gold? Although Xia Bai has revealed the secret of his battleship to everyone, he has not told them any more details about his battleship. Therefore, they are not very clear about the detailed functions of this battleship. Hearing this, Xia Bai glanced at Bailan and said with a smile, "Of course you have to be armed to the teeth. You will need to learn how to shoot." Bailan. The next journey was much smoother. In the area of Bingcheng prison, the military set up a strict defense system to kill all the zombies that slipped in. Although there were many cars crowded here, it was absolutely safe. When Xia Bai and the others finally reached the security checkpoint, when the sky was completely dark, specialized medical staff and military members wearing biochemical suits carefully inspected everyone. This was a full body examination. As long as there was a wound, it would cause high priority. The military did not confiscate the weapons carried by Xia Bai, but gave him a serious reminder to pay attention to safety. If he conflicts with others, or even kills someone in the Bingcheng prison survivor base, he will be directly expelled from the Bingcheng prison survivor base. The inspection took nearly 10 minutes to end, and their car followed a military vehicle and drove towards the Ice City prison. How Zhuang complained, "I really feel like I'm going to jail. The inspection is too strict." It had only been 3 days since the end of the world, and it was already fast enough for the military to clear a place to house the survivors. Therefore, there was basically no renovation inside the prison, and all the previous facilities were put into use. Xia Bai and the others were assigned to building 9 of the prison and actually lived in the prison. Xia Bai had experienced it a long time ago, and was used to it, but Bailan and the others looked a little awkward. After all, it was the end of the world, and they were still a little awkward about this kind of arrangement of living in a prison casually. On the first floor, a company commander came to greet him. It was a man about 26 or 17 years old, with dark skin and a resolute expression. He nodded to Xia Bai and others and said, "I'm Lan Zhangan, the person in charge of the 9th building. What happened to you in this building? I will be responsible for everything. We will arrange rooms for you. The tentative situation is that 2 people share a room. However, the water supply plant has long been damaged, and it should be temporarily out of supply. The prison has its own generator. However, power supply must be provided to military industrial facilities, so power cannot be guaranteed. However, the military will distribute a fixed amount of food per capita every day, and receive it on time at 10 o'clock every day. Please remember. Also, I heard, you have guns in your hands, right? The security guy in front may have said that, although it is the end of the world, killing people or shooting indiscriminately is still not allowed, because my company we are also responsible for the peripheral security of this area. We may not always be in the 9 buildings, but the monitoring system is operating normally. Therefore, please remain peaceful, and do not initiate conflicts with others. If a conflict occurs, please notify us immediately. Military, we will deal with it impartially. After the man said this expressionlessly, he motioned to his soldiers to take Xia Bai and others upstairs, while other survivors who arrived were also received by other soldiers. Xia Bai realized that the reason why the company commander came forward in person might be because he had a gun in his hand. After all, because of the special nature of China, firearms in the hands of civilians are highly valued. Xia Bai also knows the risks involved if a gun appears in the hands of a person who doesn't know how to use it, or who is crazy. The military agreed to allow survivors to keep the weapons they carried, which itself was a risk. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. Chapter 38 The Sneaky Vendor. Chapter 38 The Sneaky Vendor. In the previous life, Xia Bai arrived at the Bingcheng prison survivor base almost half a month after the end of the world. At that time, the building was already full of people, and there were tents everywhere outside. Now the two of them were together. A room. For Xia Bai, it was a proper noble treatment. Hao Zhuang said, "Why do I feel like I'm living in a dormitory at university?" Chen Xiancheng followed Hao Zhuang, carrying messy things, glanced at the women in other rooms, and said, "There is no such good situation in the university where men and women live together." When Yang Xin heard this, she turned her head and glanced at the two guys, saying, "What are you talking about?" Chen Xiancheng remained silent and only smiled obscenely. Xia Bai's commercial vehicle Battleship was parked in the designated parking lot at the back. Although due to the special nature of his battleship, there was no need to worry about others stealing it, but since they were going to stay here for a long time, they still moved a lot of things with them. However, the supplies were packed very carefully in the backpack to avoid being seen by other survivors and causing unreasonable trouble. Although the military only issued a broadcast to the entire Ice City area this morning, in less than a day, nearly 10,000 survivors had poured in. Every place seemed overcrowded. At the location of the building, the corridors here are full of people, and there are some injured people. Various people make various noises, making it very chaotic. Xia Bai was already used to this. This is the norm in the apocalypse. It is better to be surrounded by living people than by zombies. However, Hao Zhuang and others seemed a little uncomfortable with it. Even Bailan frowned slightly, obviously not really adapting to this place scene. Most of the 9 buildings are single or double cells, and the 7th floor is all 2-person rooms. The rooms are not big. Therefore, the 3.5 rooms allocated to them by the military means that among the 7 people, there is a person who lives with others. Seeing the slightly embarrassed expressions on Bailan and others' faces, Xia Bai took a box of yogurt that he had taken out at some point and headed towards the shed room. He could understand Bailan's mood. In this situation, they didn't like living with others. Bailan hesitated for a moment and said that. Xia Bai waved his hand and said, "If you have any questions, come to me." With that said, he had already walked away. Bailan looked at Xia Bai's back, her eyes flickering slightly. Xia Bai's room was at the very back of the 7th floor. Because they were shared, it was difficult to be arranged into a room next to Bailan and the others. The other guest in the room was a middle-aged man. Xia Bai was shrinking when he came in, crying in the corner. When he noticed Xia Bai walking in, he raised his head slightly, glanced at Xia Bai with his eyes that were red from crying. His face changed slightly, and he angrily shouted, "Get out." Obviously, this guy doesn't welcome anyone living with him. In response to this, Xia Bai just smiled. He pulled out the gun from his waist and loaded it with a click. His movements were unusually skillful and made a loud noise. The man with red eyes from crying stared blankly at Xia Bai for a moment, then lowered his head very simply and continued to cry bitterly. The angry rebuke just now seemed not to be what he said at all. Xia Bai turned around and found that a couple with a child at the opposite door were also looking at Xia Bai and the gun in his hand with a very frightened look. Xia Bai smiled and put down the things in his hands. After confirming the situation of Bailan and the others, he locked the door, got into the single bed, ate something briefly, and then put the pistol in his hand. He tied his hands and went to sleep. There is no TikTok, Weibo or the like to browse. In the current situation, apart from sleeping to replenish his strength and energy, Xia Bai can't think of anything meaningful he should do. The man in the corner seemed to notice that Xia Bai was sleeping, and his crying became inexplicably quiet. Xia Bai knew clearly that this was not because the guy was polite, but because he was afraid of the gun in his hand. If Xia Bai had really get out when the man scolded her just now, she would probably have to sleep in the corridor outside. Even in the apocalypse, most people are afraid of the hard. Xia Bai slept until midnight and was awakened by a knock on the door. He sleeps very lightly, and even if there is the slightest disturbance, he will wake up immediately. This is the skill Xia Bai developed in the last 5 years of the apocalypse, and it is also an important ability that allowed him to survive the full 5 years of the apocalypse. He heard someone outside say, "Mr. Xia," listening to the voice, it seems to be the small vendor from today. Xia Bai glanced at the crying man on the opposite bed and found that he had already fallen asleep, so he stood up in the dark. It was midnight, the darkest time of the day. He took off his gun, walked to the door, opened the door slightly, and looked outside. The person standing outside was indeed the small vendor from the daytime. When he saw Xia Bai opening the door, he immediately put on a flattering smile and said, "Well, Mr. Xia, do you still want the weapons and equipment?" After Xia Bai heard this, he walked out directly and closed the door behind his back. At this time, the corridor became quiet, no longer as noisy as before, and most people had rested. Xia Bai said, "Do you have channels?" The small vendor nodded and said, "I asked a big boss above today. He has channels in this area, but he wants to meet you first." Xia Bai glanced at this guy, a little wary, and said, "Here, no, outside, not outside the prison, somewhere on the other side of the prison." "Okay, I'll ask someone to go with me." The person Xia Bai wants to call is of course Bailan. As an awakened one, this guy's fighting skills are truly outstanding. Moreover, after these 2 days, her gunshot wound had almost recovered. Even Bailan herself did not believe this terrifying recovery speed. However, after this time, she also truly realized that she was the awakened ones have huge advantages and potential in this doomsday. Xia Bai believed that, even if the other party set up a trap to deceive him, he and Bailan would not be easily defeated by the other party. When the vendor saw Bailan, the person Xia Bai was going to bring, he was slightly stunned. He didn't know why he wanted to bring a weak and fragile woman, and he thought, was he trying to trade with the woman? His expression became a little strange, but he didn't ask any questions, but just silently led the way. At night, the military security outside became even tighter. The survivors who were let in had all passed the security check and there was no possibility of losing their lives or becoming zombies. Therefore, their patrols and security focus more on the outer areas. Lin Zhang and the company he belongs to also has to patrol everywhere, so there are only 2 squads of people left behind. However, they will not control the survivors from going out. It is not easy to write a new book. I hope all the book lovers who like this book will support it. Chapter 39. Do you sell missiles? Chapter 39. Do you sell missiles? Why does this look like an underground party joint? This complaint came from Bailan, who was following Xia Bai closely. She stared at the vendor in front of her who was about to lead them through half of the Ice City prison and asked with some suspicion. Xia Bai didn't say anything and just followed the other party silently. They had been gone for 5 or 6 minutes, but Xia Bai knew that this meant that the hawker had no other thoughts. If the other party wanted to rob them, they would have had plenty of opportunities in the 9 prisons. There was no need to go so far. Therefore, now that we have come this far, we may really want to trade point next. They walked for about 2 minutes, and the vendor took them into a green grove behind the prison and finally stopped point. There was a stool in the middle of the bushes. Sitting on the stool was a young man wearing a peaked cap, smoking point. The faint orange light dimmed slightly. It was not eye-catching, but seemed a bit dreamy point. Noticing the arrival of Xia Bai and others, he stood up immediately point. The vendor introduced Xia Bai first, and then without waiting for him to introduce the young man spoke himself and said, "Yang Chengxi, nice to meet you." The sky was dark and Xia Bai couldn't see the other person's face clearly, but when he heard the name, he was slightly surprised point. He had heard of this man point in the previous life. This Yang Chengxi was a prominent figure in the Ice City survivor base and a big boss in the black market. It was said that he was very resourceful and controlled many types of resources. Xia Bai even heard that those in Ice City, the ordinary firearms and bullets circulating in the city's survivor base all flowed from Yang Chengxi point. When Xia Bai came to the survivor base of Bingcheng prison, this man was already a boss level figure whose name was never seen. In the previous life, Xia Bai even had a dream. I have stopped thinking, if I could hang out with people like this, I wouldn't have to think about running away like a lost dog. However, at this moment, Xia Bai never expected that he would meet this legendary figure on the first day he arrived at the Bingcheng prison survivor base point. Of course, at this moment, he may not be a legend yet point. However, this is the first day that the survivor base has just begun to accept survivors and put them into use. But this person has already started selling goods, which shows his powerful resources and abilities. However, seeing this person, Xia Bai felt relieved point, because the reason why Yang Chengxi became the black market boss of the Ice City survivor base is not only because of his unpredictable and unique powerful resource channels, nor not only because of his ruthless tactics and acting style, but also because he has a famous reputation. And this reputation is integrity point. Some people say that integrity is meaningless in the end of the world. But in this kind of survivor base, if you want to really do this kind of resource wrestling, it is not enough to have channels and skills. Only with integrity can more survivors be willing to cooperate with you. You make a deal and in turn, integrity alone means nothing point. This is actually a very ironic thing. Everyone wants others to be honest, but it is difficult for them to be honest themselves. But because of this person's character is excellent in terms of pure business. At this moment, the Bingcheng prison survivor base has just accepted survivors, and this one is probably in the initial stage. Xia Bai was able to get in touch with this future boss. Xia Bai didn't expect that any hawker he recruited would be able to hook up with Yang Chengxi. This was really a stroke of luck. Of course, this was also because Yang Chengxi had not yet become a big deal point at that moment. Xia Bai smiled and said, "Nice to meet you, Yang." Chengxi paused briefly and said, "What do you want?" Xia Bai thought for a while and said, "Red bird or thunder, are there any?" Listening to what Xia Bai said, Bailan was a little confused. What are red birds and thunder? Aren't they here to buy weapons? The little vendor's expression changed slightly. Yang Chengxi's expression was quite calm. He glanced at Xia Bai. After confirming that this person was not talking nonsense, he said, "You are not in the military system, are you?" Xia Bai shook his head. Then, "What do you want missiles for?" When he said these words, Yang Chengxi's face twitched. The two things Xia Bai mentioned were all missiles. Yang Chengxi could not imagine that a commoner survivor with a flat head would buy weapons and equipment. It's not something unusual, but Grand Marte's purchase of missiles. Are you sure you're not kidding me? Why am I teasing you? Xia Bai's expression was serious. His fighter plane has 2 missile magazines, and the missile magazine of the battleship is adjustable and can load any type of missiles. However, Xia Bai's current battleship cannot manufacture missiles at all. He wants to fill them. 2 empty magazines must be purchased from outside. The 2 types Xia Bai mentioned are what he thinks may be available here point. If the person standing in front of him wasn't the famous Yang Chengxi, Xia Bai wouldn't dare to come up and buy missiles. But, as a time traveler, Xia Bai already knew that this person had good integrity and good channels. Of course, the big boss who wrestles supplies will say whatever he needs. Yang Chengxi pressed down his peaked cap and glanced at Xia Bai with some depression, realizing that this person did not seem to be deceiving him. But he was still a little confused by Xia Bai. Yang Chengxi really couldn't imagine how ordinary survivors could use missiles. Could they rush into the zombie pile with missiles and then detonate them themselves? That's not as practical as strapping a bunch of bombs to your body. He exhaled and said, there are no red birds. I may be able to get you one or two of the Thunder series missiles, but in this transaction, I'm not selling missiles. You should understand, right? Yang Chengxi was still a little confused, so he didn't dare to sell things of this level. Xia Bai also understood this truth. He had to stay here until spring anyway, and he had plenty of time to get closer to Yang Chengxi. Therefore, he said, I understand. I just agreed on the missiles in advance, and you can't sell them to others. Yang Chengxi wiped his hands with cold sweat, thinking who the hell knows how to sell missiles, but he still said, don't worry, the deal is done this time. As long as you can afford the price, I will definitely get you missiles. Xia Bai smiled and said, thank you very much. Then this time, I will buy some small items first. The small items Xia Bai was talking about were pistols, rifles, spray guns and corresponding bullets, as well as tactical grenades, smoke grenades, and the 30mm caliber bullets necessary for his battleship's cannon. In addition, he also wanted to purchase a batch of body armor and explosion-proof shields from Yang Chengxi. Anyway, Xia Bai was talking about the equipment that 20 kilograms of gold could buy in his memory at this time. He was not worried that Yang Chengxi wouldn't be able to provide it. This was the future owner of the ordnance supplies of the Ice City prison survivor base. If he couldn't get what Xia Bai wanted, then Xia Bai wouldn't be able to buy it from someone else. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. Chapter 45. Chapter 45. After listening to Xia Bai naming what he wanted to buy, Yang Chengxi narrowed his eyes slightly and said, this is indeed something I can get. What price are you willing to pay? Xia Bai said, I have more gold here, and I can use it for other things too. It just depends on what price you want. Yang Chengxi smiled and said, brother, you are not too shy. So, 30 pounds of gold plus 2 pounds of salt or sugar, do you think it's okay? This price is slightly higher than Xia Bai expected. The price of gold should not have fallen to this level yet. But he didn't refuse, but said, the price is a bit high, but it doesn't matter. When can you give me something? In fact, Xia Bai has wronged Yang Chengxi now. Yang Chengxi is indeed at the stage of just starting to wrestle. The Bingcheng prison survivor base has only just formed a scale, and the transactions between each other and the circulation of goods have not yet formed. Yang Chengxi himself was a little confused about the pricing. After all, how can ordinary people be like Xia Bai? Yang Chengxi was stunned for a moment and said, well, brother, I will definitely get the things for you in 3 days at the latest. At that time, I will ask someone to contact you, and we will pay the money and deliver the goods. Don't worry, I also want to really do it. A business person will never do anything contrary to his word. Xia Bai believed this, and after that, the two chatted a few more words, but they were all somewhat probing. Xia Bai wanted to find out how Yang Chengxi obtained all these supplies and weapons, and Yang Chengxi wanted to know what Xia Bai was going to do to buy missiles. However, these two people were very cautious and kept everything secret about matters related to themselves. It was completely up to you to ask. This attitude means I'm the loser. Therefore, after chatting for a long time, all the patrolling military personnel came over. They didn't get the information they wanted from each other, so they could only disperse with guilty consciences. But the little vendor still followed Xia Bai, looking at him eagerly. To be honest, he was really surprised today. This man just bought so many weapons, but he actually wanted to buy missiles. What a great guy. Xia Bai glanced at him, stuffed him with a pack of cigarettes, and said, when the deal is completed, you will benefit. By the way, are you from Yang Chengxi's side? The vendor shook his head and said, no, we just knew each other before, so we were able to set up this line. Xia Bai nodded and said, I knew him before. Then do you know what he did before? The little vendor gave a bitter smile. Brother, you misunderstood what I meant. My previous is not before the end of the world. We met during the end of the world. Xia Bai couldn't help but touch his nose, thinking that it had only been a few days since the end of the world. What could he say? That he had known each other before? And then the little vendor said, "Well, brother." Xia Bai looked at the guy's awkward expression and asked curiously, "What are you doing? In addition to the few people on the surface, do you also have a large army secretly?" Xia Bai was stunned for a moment and then realized that this guy might have misunderstood what he meant by buying so many weapons. However, the little vendor misunderstood Xia Bai's expression. He hurriedly said, "No, I'm not trying to find out what you mean. I just want to ask, are you still short of people over there? Although I don't have much ability, I used to. Even those who set up stalls to buy grilled cold noodles have great business acumen and can also watch people's actions." Xia Bai, this guy, wants to hug his thigh. However, in the end, Xia Bai still didn't agree to the vendor. He just asked the vendor to help him connect with Yangqing's point. His battleship now has 7 people, which is already saturated, and although this person looks okay, he is a person who doesn't know the details. Who knows what will happen when the critical moment comes. However, it's good to know such a person. At least in this survivor base, Xia Bai doesn't have to deal with many trivial matters by himself. The small vendor failed to successfully embrace Xia Bai's potential thigh and was still a little frustrated. And when Xia Bai and the others returned to their 9th building, it was already past 2 o'clock in the morning. However, it is now October, and the sky at this time is still shrouded in absolute darkness. Outside, there are still a steady stream of survivors pouring into the prison, and inside the prison, there are people everywhere. They are all patrolling military personnel, but there are no zombies howling here, which can make people feel a little more at ease. When Xia Bai came back, he met Lin Jiangan, the company commander who was in charge of them. He was coming back from outside with a group of people. Lin Jiangan was still expressionless as always. When he saw Xia Bai and the others, he just glanced at him. He hurried past. Xia Bai estimated that this person had forgotten about him. After all, there were too many survivors pouring in now. Of course, it doesn't matter whether Lin Jiangan recognizes him or not. He returned to his room. His roommate Crying Man was still sleeping soundly. Xia Bai didn't wake him up. He lay down to sleep. He only slept for about 2 or 3 hours before he was vaguely awakened. The cry woke me up. Xia Bai sat up from his bed, squinted his eyes and looked over, and saw that the man in the bed opposite was crying. The other party seemed to notice Xia Bai's gaze, trembled in fright, and immediately didn't dare to say anything. After a moment, the guy took out a wafer from his arms and tentatively handed it to Xia Bai in a flattering manner. "Come over." Xia Bai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't take the other person's things, but said, "Don't worry, I won't shoot you." After saying such words, Xia Bai stood up, turned around and walked out. It was only around 8 o'clock in the morning, but there were already people everywhere outside. Soldiers and survivors are everywhere, and comparing the two, there are more survivors. The military's limited strength, coupled with the number of people from government departments and police, cannot be more than the number of survivors. According to this trend, it will soon be impossible for 2 people to share a room here. At this moment, neither Hao Zhuang nor the others woke up. This was their first peaceful sleep since the end of the world, and it was normal to sleep in late. Xia Bai first came to his commercial vehicle and battleship and started making smoke and gold. After giving the instructions, he jumped out of the car and ran to another destination. As mentioned before, Xia Bai came to the Bingqing prison survivor base and wanted to find an acquaintance. According to memory, the other party should be in building 3. That acquaintance is very strange. He clearly arrived after the apocalypse. Not only is he located in a very early building, he even has a room of his own. According to Xia, as far as Bai knew, there was nothing extraordinary about his acquaintance. Of course, Xia Bai estimated that at this moment, his acquaintance might not be here yet, but he still couldn't bear the eagerness in his heart and wanted to take a look. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. Chapter 41 reported. Chapter 41 reported the situation was just as Xia Bai expected. He came to building 3 and searched up and down, but couldn't find his acquaintance Point at this moment. The other party obviously hasn't come here yet. Point he couldn't help but exhale and shook his head. Just when he was about to leave, he suddenly heard a very familiar voice. Compatriots, don't miss it when you are passing by. I'm here. This sound is. Xia Bai turned his head and walked over following the sound. Point the voice came from a room full of survivors. Xia Bai tried his best to squeeze in and saw a guy. Point. That was Huang Jingfu, who almost had a conflict at the gas station before. Point the greasy middle-aged man looked thinner now. He was standing on a bed and talking to the many survivors below. I have a doomsday magic medicine here that can resist the zombie virus. Think about it. Now it's like this in this situation. Who can guarantee that he will not be bitten? If he is bitten, it will be the end of slow death and eventually turning into a zombie. But with my medicine, you don't have to worry. My medicine is from aliens. Got it in. When he said this, someone below said, alien? Why don't you use your brains to deceive people, even if you are selling fake medicine? When Huang Jingfu heard this, his expression changed, and he raised his eyebrows and said, I'm lying to you? Am I stupid? I'm deceiving people with aliens? What I said is true. 2 days ago, just 2 days ago, the gas station on the highway exploded. Have you all heard about the incident? I'm a survivor at the scene. I saw it with my own eyes, and the police even asked me about the situation in detail. I was the one who wisely detonated the gas station and blew up the alien ship that day, spaceship, and even took huge risks to sneak back in, and then we got this medicine from the alien spaceship. To be honest, Huang Jingfu does have an ability that is hard to match when it comes to deceiving people. Although he has an unflattering face, he is still able to say such nonsense while foaming at the mouth. It's like getting to know the real thing. Point. But this guy blew up the gas station. Xia Bai stared at this guy. Although he had thought about making the idiot who blew up the gas station look good, Huang Jingfu, a fat-minded guy, didn't seem like someone who could do that kind of thing. Bullshit is a scam. Point at that moment, Xia Bai squeezed out the crowd very decisively, went to the first floor to find the military personnel on duty, and simply reported that there was a scammer upstairs selling fake medicine. Then, he silently followed the 2 soldiers and rushed up. Lao, hiding in the corner and watching Huang Jingfu being caught, left silently. Point. Although there are surveillance cameras in the corridor, Xia Bai knows that the surveillance is checked by the police commissioner and is monitored centrally. Under the current situation, unless there is a big conflict, it is difficult to notice this kind of counterfeit medicine. After killing a lot of harm for the people, Xia Bai returned to his 9-story building, but as soon as he reached the first floor, he heard someone whispering, there is a group of college students on the 7th floor, who are fighting with others. People from the military are go up the 7th floor, isn't that your own floor? And, college students. Xia Bai rushed upstairs and saw Bailan and others confronting another group of people. The military personnel had indeed arrived and were standing in the middle of the 2 groups, mediating. Point. Xia Bai came over and took a look at Bailan's situation first. Point. All 6 of them came out. Half of Yang Xin's face was red, obviously he had been beaten. On the other side were 5 men in their 30s. The leader was holding a gun in his hand. He dangled in front of the 2 mediating soldiers, pointing at Bailan and others in front of him, with a slightly sarcastic look on his face. Point. The soldier said, sir, please put down your gun immediately. The leading man said, if I put down the gun, what will I do? If they take action? Drive them out first. Hearing this, Hao Zhuang said angrily, you were the one who made the move first. Now you're biting us. At this time, Xia Bai squeezed out of the crowd and walked over, glanced at these people, looked at Bailan, and said, what's going on? Bailan and others were slightly shaken when they saw Xia Bai coming back. Bailan said, there are too many survivors, and not enough space. They were assigned to our side. Xingxin was kind enough to make room for them, but they wanted to drive us out, and even Xia Bai was a little strange. Bailan was an awakened person. If he really took action, not to mention these 5 people, even a dozen or so would be beaten down. Point. Bailan also saw Xia Bai's confusion. She said, they beat people and yelled first, then the military people, before Balan finished speaking, Xia Bai understood. This group of people started the thing first, but they shouted to catch the thief and called the soldiers below. Not only did they want Balan and the others to suffer the loss of being dumb, but they also wanted to take this opportunity to accuse Balan and the others of fighting and drive them out. This group of people was obviously bullying Balan and the others, who had little social experience. At this time, after hearing what Balan said, the leading man said, "Brother Jun, that's not the case. They were the ones who made the move first. If you don't believe me, ask the survivors around you." The gun in his hand was swinging like a pendulum. Which survivor around him dared to say that what this man said was wrong? The soldier frowned slightly, and just as he was about to say something, Xia Bai suddenly spoke, "You hid my guy, right?" At this moment, Xia Bai turned around. He stood in front of this person, his eyes darkened. "I was acting in self-defense. Your people took action first. Why don't you allow me to act in self-defense?" Yang Xing covered her face and said angrily, "Not at all, it's you." Xia Bai took a breath and directly interrupted Yang Xing's words. He said slowly to the man in front of him, "You can do it to others in legitimate defense, but you can't do it to my people." The leading man was slightly stunned when he heard Xia Bai's words, because Xia Bai's words were obviously unreasonable, and he was not prepared to be reasonable. Xia Bai looked at this guy and sneered, "You have touched my people, and you still want to take advantage of me and get away? I'm afraid you are just dreaming." At this moment, Xia Bai's eyes looked a little scary. When the leading man met such eyes, he couldn't help but take half a step back, glanced at the soldiers on the other side, swallowed and said, "What? In front of our people's liberation army, you still want to? Can't you do it? I'm going to take action." When Xia Bai said this, he took action like lightning. He took a step forward, blocked the opponent's hand holding the gun like lightning, grabbed the opponent's wrist and pulled back. The moment he let out a scream and involuntarily released the gun in his hand, he punched the man directly in the face. Hao Zuan, who was behind Xia Bai, took out a swing stick he got from somewhere and shouted, "Fuck that guy." Dear book lovers, please support if you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World. It means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42 Get the Weapon. Chapter 42 Get the Weapon. The scene suddenly became chaotic. But for both parties involved, this was a one-sided massacre. Xia Bai was the first to make a move, but it was Balan who really knocked down the group on the other side. This guy was still suffering from a gunshot wound, but he punched each one when he came forward. Those men with pretty good physiques were stunned to be beaten by such a beautiful and delicate girl. They were in a tragic mess. Someone from the military started the fight. It didn't work either. Balan knocked them all down in one breath. The final result was that they were all dragged into a conversation by military personnel. Lin Zhonggan came forward in person. His expression was not good, and he directly gathered all the fighting parties together, leading a small soldier to do reconciliation in a small dark room. However, the group of troublemakers are currently in a state of being bruised and swollen and howling miserably. Even if they talk again now, I'm afraid they won't be able to say anything. On the other hand, Xia Bai, before Lin Yanggan could say anything, very cleverly picked up a piece of Chinese medicine, handed it over directly, and said with a smile, "Take care of me, take care of me." Lin Yanggan glanced at Xia Bai with a very stern look, but still took the cigarette and handed it to another soldier behind him. The expression on his face did not change much during the whole process. On the other hand, the little warrior following him looked at the china in his hand with a happy face. Seeing this, Xia Bai exhaled slightly, but Balan took a step forward at this moment, as if he wanted to explain something, but Lin Yanggan looked first, and he said to Balan, "Are you the awakened one?" Balan, "Huh, why? Didn't you report it before?" Balan, "Huh, remember to level up later. I will send someone to take you to the scientific research center to draw blood and go through the procedures." When Balan followed Xia Bai out, she was still confused. She looked at Xia Bai, who looked relaxed in front of her, thought about it, took 2 steps forward, and said, "Well, let's fight." fighting. That's it. Xia Bai stood still, smiled, and said, rules are dead, people are alive. In this situation, as long as no one is really killed, who can really care so much? He glanced at Balan and the others and said slowly, the current situation is different after all. As long as you wait for those who have beaten you, never think about compromising and suffering a loss. The more you give in, the more others will slap you in the face. Some even if people know that bullying the weak is wrong, they always want to step on their faces when they see how scared they are. For people like this, it's better to give them a punch if you want to be reasonable. Although, it's terrible to say this, in this world now, we care more about the strong. How? Zhuang said, what the boss said makes sense, I agree. Just now, it was really a relief. Bai Lan seemed a little silent. To be honest, she didn't take action at that time, because she was worried about this and that, worried about the gun in the other person's hand, and worried about whether she would be kicked out by the military if she really took action. However, it turned out that it's true that I'm a little timid. Xia Bai smiled at her, turned and walked forward, saying, well, originally I wanted to hide your identity as an awakened person, but now it doesn't matter if it is exposed. Follow the military to draw blood. No. There will be other problems. It is impossible for the military to be unaware of the existence of the awakened. They have even started researching it a long time ago. In the relatively safe place of survivors in Ice City Prison, they will establish relevant research departments to search for awakened ones among the survivors. It is normal for researchers to conduct data analysis on their conditions. However, as far as Xia Bai knows, their research in this area has encountered considerable resistance. For 5 years, they have achieved almost no results. Progress. This seemingly simple alien zombie virus is completely indecipherable to the existing fields of biology and genetics on Earth. This was just a small episode, and after they fought here, they also reaped a benefit. More and more survivors were pouring in from the outside world, but even if they were assigned, no one dared to ask for it moved into Balan's room. Therefore, while 5 or 6 people were crowded into other rooms, people even started to lay down the floor in the corridor, and a large number of tents appeared on the ground floor outside. Balan's room was still very spacious for 2 people. Especially after Balan's identity as the awakened one was exposed. People were in awe of this pretty girl, and didn't dare to get too close. This is also a good thing for Xia Bai and the others. After all, in the current situation, if other people come in the same room, there will be a lot of inconveniences. If the person who comes in is a bad person, he may become a big trouble. In the early days of the apocalypse, the Ice City Prison survivor base was an indestructible existence. A large number of survivors gathered every day. While the military continued to search for survivors in the Ice City, it also began to converge here. The survivor base also uses materials as reward to gather survivors everywhere in the survivor base to build peripheral defenses. The most effective weapon against zombies is a high wall. The military is trying to think of ways to reinforce the original surrounding walls. With the help of many survivors, it shouldn't be difficult to achieve this. On the other hand, the place has almost lost contact with the outside world. Xia Bai found almost no signals other than local signals on the civilian frequency without wires, and could not get any news from the outside world. Perhaps the military is aware of the current world situation, but they obviously have no intention of announcing the situation to the survivors, and are just adopting a policy of appeasement. On the 3rd day after Xia Bai arrived at the Bingcheng prison survivor base, Yang Chengxi got all the things Xia Bai wanted to buy. And what made Xia Bai dumbfounded was that Yang Chengxi also provided a door-to-door delivery service. He brought 5 or 6 people, drove 2 vans, stopped directly downstairs in the 9th building, and personally helped Xia Bai get what he wanted. Everything was loaded into Xia Bai's commercial vehicle. It can be seen that Yang Chengxi, the future reseller of supplies in the Ice City survivor base, attaches great importance to Xia Bai, a big customer, and is also working hard to establish a good relationship with Xia Bai, and establish a relationship with Xia Bai. After paying the reward as promised, he promised to get missiles for Xia Bai within half a month, but Yang Cheng's he could not guarantee how many missiles he could get. For Xia Bai, if he could really get the missile, it would be a surprise among surprises. This Yang Cheng's he is really powerful. After everyone left, Xia Bai couldn't close his grin as he looked at the weapons and equipment that filled almost half a truck. Dear book lovers, please support me, please add me to your favorites, please vote for me, and please give me rewards. Why do I feel like I'm playing alone? Chapter 43 Chuking. Chapter 43 Chuking October 25, 2018 at 11:36 p.m. Bing Chengzicheng Mall. Chuking was running desperately, and behind her, 2 zombies were chasing her crazily. This shopping mall was closed when the apocalypse broke out, so there were not many zombies. However, after the apocalypse broke out, it seemed to have received a lot of attention from people. There were broken windows and rummaged products everywhere, traces of passing. The dangers here are low, but the rewards are high, so many survivors will target this kind of place. That's why Chuking appeared here, and she did gain a lot. She filled a backpack full of food in the underground supermarket, but she was targeted by zombies. The scarcity of zombies does not mean that there are no zombies as time goes by. Zombies will fill every corner of the city like air. As long as there are people coming or going, there may be zombies. However, as Chuking ran all the way from the underground supermarket to the first floor, the distance between her and the zombies not only did not widen, but became closer and closer. The mobility of the zombies spawned by these alien viruses was far beyond that of ordinary people, let alone the slow-moving things in zombie movies. Although Chuking used to exercise often, now she is carrying a bag full of things and has been running around for a few days. She is already exhausted. If she keeps running like this, the consequences, I'm afraid she will only be beaten. The zombie jumped down and bit him to death. Chuking gritted her teeth. Although she was extremely reluctant to give up, she still turned her head and threw away the backpack on her body. She didn't know what was in her school bag. It was quite heavy. She hit the zombie head on and flipped the madly forward zombie to the ground with a loud noise. But the second zombie had already taken advantage of Chuking's attack and pounced forward and was about to arrive in front of Chuking. But Chuking was surprisingly calm. She reached out to pull the half-collapsed vending machine, pulled it down, smashed it on the zombie's body, and knocked it over. Chuking exhaled and raised the corners of her mouth slightly, looking a little proud, but she also knew that this could only stop these zombies for a while at most. At that moment, she turned around and planned to take this opportunity to run away. However, when she turned around, she saw a bloody mouth close at hand. A zombie didn't know when it came to her, opened its mouth and bit it down. At that moment, Chuking felt that the blood in his body had solidified and his body was cold. However, at the critical moment, a hand stretched out from one side and pulled Chuking suddenly, forcibly saving Chuking from behind the zombies. The instantaneous change of life and death left Chuking in a daze, but she instantly rekindled her hope of life. She noticed that the person who saved her life was a young child wearing a blue and white school uniform. He seemed to be a junior high school student, but at this moment the other party felt surprisingly safe in Chuking's eyes. He was not as tall as Chuking, but he stood in front of her, holding a stick he got from nowhere in his hand, and smashed it against the zombies. At that moment, Chuking felt that this junior high school student was extremely handsome. If she could survive today, she would definitely marry him. However, crack sound. The zombie pulled away and knocked the junior high school student's bat away. The junior high school student staggered slightly, but this guy still seemed to remember to be cool and said angrily, "I'll give it to you. Block it and go." Who is Chuking? She has a perfect and delicate face and a perfect figure that can make any man look at her, but she is not a goddess type guy. On the contrary, she is a complete female man. This guy has no self-consciousness. Her personality is also carefree, and sometimes she even acts stupidly. Running around alone in the apocalypse is nothing to her. For such a person, if she meets a random passerby and the other person ignores her or even tries to harm her, she will definitely run away now. But right now, if this junior high school student wants to help her fight off zombies, she will definitely not reason to run. You kidding me? How could I let a child risk his life to save me? As He said this. The guy directly picked up the wooden stick that was knocked away from the ground, rushed forward in 3 steps and 2 at a time, and took advantage of the moment when the zombie was attacking the junior high school student and had no time to pay attention and hit the zombie with a heavy stick on the head. Chuking Ma exerted all her strength, and when she struck down the stick, the zombie stumbled back 3 steps after being hit by her, but Chuking had already directly grabbed the junior high school student's hand, preparing to pull him away. If it were a normal human being, they would definitely be confused for a while after such a stick. However, what they were facing at this moment were zombies. The monster only shook for a moment before regaining its balance. It let out a terrifying howl and rushed towards Chuking and the others on the other side. The 2 zombies that Chuking had just tried to delay also stood up and attacked them from another direction. These monsters with tattered bodies and ferocious faces arrived almost instantly in front of them. There is no way to hide, no way to avoid. Chuking has only one thought at this moment. It's over. She instinctively squatted down, used her body to protect the junior high school student, and pressed him down to squat down. She had already closed her eyes hard, waiting for the zombie's hoarseness and the most terrifying death. However, at this moment, 3 muffled gunshots, almost in no particular order, shook around her. Chuking was so frightened that he trembled all over, and then he reacted, raised his head, and turned around like lightning. In her eyes, the clear coursers showed that the 3 zombies' foreheads exploded with blood and they were killed instantly. After their bodies swayed slightly for a moment, they tilted and fell heavily to the ground. The shooter was standing not far away. He was a young man in his 20s. He wore a black bulletproof vest inside and a set of casual clothes outside. They were all famous brands and had trademarks. I didn't have time to pick it off. It was obvious that I had just changed it in the mall. Just when something happened here, I fired directly. The man was still holding the gun. After confirming that there was no danger, he lowered the muzzle of the gun, nodded to Chuking here, turned around and walked away. Chuking was stunned on the spot. This guy was obviously not that handsome, so why did he look so handsome and cool? Moreover, was that guy a soldier? If you can find this guy as your boyfriend in the apocalypse, wow, not only will he be handsome, but he will also ensure your own safety. At this moment, Chuking jumped up from the ground under the stunned gaze of the confused high school student. Hey, don't leave. I haven't thanked you yet. What's your name? The man paused slightly and said, you'd better keep your voice down. There are still zombies here. My name is Xia Bai, dear book lovers. It's not easy to write a new book, so I hope you can support me. Chapter 44 Incomprehensible Style. Chapter 44. Incomprehensible Style. Xia Bai was a little depressed. This was his second trip to the Ice City Prison Survivor Base on October 25th. Survivors in the Ice City Prison Survivor Base can leave the Survivor Base, but they need to go through another security check and many troublesome procedures before and after, and these 2 times, Xia Bai came out with only one purpose: to hunt zombies. He drove out of the Ice City Prison alone, carrying a large number of weapons, hunting zombies everywhere on the edge of the city and in sparsely populated open areas in order to accumulate his own energy points and strive to upgrade the battleship to 3 in the shortest time. Level up point. Although Xia Bai is only one person, he has sufficient weapons and ammunition, rich experience in fighting zombies, and has battleships to clear the way. As long as he does not risk his own death to find the zombies, he can basically achieve a large number of enemies while ensuring safety. Hunt zombies. The first time he came out, it took him a whole day to earn a full 127 energy points. Now, he went out to hunt zombies for the second time. With experience, he earned 127 energy points in half a day. The energy points have exceeded 100 points. Others kill zombies out of necessity to survive, but Xia Bai hunts zombies everywhere. Just now, he ran into a hypermarket and changed into a pair of brand name clothes in a very low-key manner. As soon as he turned around, he met 2 survivors who were chasing their heads and running away from each other by zombies. According to the principle of collecting energy points conveniently, he directly rescued him. Then Xia Bai planned to leave. But 2 survivors actually ran up on their own initiative. The first one, a girl with a hot figure and a pretty face, trotted up from behind and came to Xia Bai's side. With a flattering smile on her face, she said, are you a soldier? The Situation was actually normal when we got here. Xia Bai shook his head in response and walked forward silently. But the girl's next words changed her tone. Wow, are you a veteran? Or the legendary king of soldiers? Can you take us with you? Do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? Xia Bai, he couldn't help but glance at the girl next to him and found that this guy belonged to the kind of absolutely heartless optimist. He was being chased by zombies just now, but now he was approaching her with a smile on his face. Beautiful, optimistic, carefree, lacking a sense of crisis. In Xia Bai's mind, there is only one word associated with this kind of person: burdensome. Therefore, after a moment of silence, Xia Bai speeded up his pace and walked forward faster and faster. The girl followed Xia Bai and gradually couldn't keep up, shouting, "Why are you walking so fast? Handsome guy, let's get together. I'm serious, don't look at me like this, but I'm still a little bit children's ability to survive," she said as she followed Xia Bai outside. As soon as the store door opened, 3 or 4 zombies outside turned their heads and looked this way, then moved and staggered towards them. As Xia Bai continued to move forward, he calmly raised the muzzle of his gun, held the M4A1 in his hand, and fired coldly. The zombies were instantly knocked down by him. The girl who was following him couldn't help but was speechless when she saw this. However, when she turned around, Xia Bai had already walked to the side of a commercial vehicle, opened the door, and got in. Seeing this, the girl quickly took 2 steps forward. "Hey, handsome guy, wait for us." With that said, she rushed to Xia Bai's car very familiarly and reached out to open the door, but unfortunately, the car was locked from the inside and she didn't open it. But Xia Bai didn't have any intention of staying. He simply started his commercial vehicle and drove away under the dumbfounded gaze of the girl. After watching Xia Bai's car hit a zombie and disappear around the corner in front, the girl came back to her senses and showed a dejected look on her face. "Are you being disliked?" Her fellow junior high school student was not as nervous as Xia Bai. He kept looking around and said nervously, "Auntie, let's leave quickly." "Who are you calling auntie?" The girl said, "Remember, I'm telling you, if you are as clueless as that guy just now, no matter how handsome you are, you will never find a girlfriend in your life. You just met her. How do you know she doesn't have a girlfriend?" Xia Bai, who was driving, sneezed inexplicably. As for carrying beautiful girls, that doesn't exist here in Xia Bai. Are you kidding me? Is it important for women to upgrade their battleships? If Xia Bai was really hungry and thirsty and took out 2 or 3 kilograms of gold, he would be able to sleep with whatever he wanted in the Bingcheng prison survivor base, and he would be even less likely to stay here. Xia Bai drove around the city. He planned to find a high point where there were not many zombies and hunt the surrounding zombies. This is safe and secure, but the killing speed will be reduced. However, the future is long, so it is better to be safe. At that moment, Xia Bai drove into an alley and walked up the external iron stairs to the rooftop. However, just as he set up his rifle, he noticed the people on the other side of the building. Condition: that's a crossroads. A continuous roar of zombies was heard from a 2-story store. Mixed with human cries, there seemed to be a large number of survivors inside the supermarket, so there were a large number of zombies surrounding it. At this moment, these zombies had just torn a large hole in the fragile rolling shutter door of the supermarket outside and were howling towards them through the gap. Inside, the situation is precarious. Almost all the zombies in the street were attracted. Xia Bai made a rough estimate and found that there were at least 100. Because the gap in the rolling shutter door was not big, at most 1 or 2 zombies could pour in at a time. There seemed to be a lot of survivors inside, so they were still resisting desperately and trying to keep the zombies out. Xia Bai did not hesitate, directly set up his gun on the rooftop and fired directly from a distance of less than 200 meters. The scene at the supermarket was in chaos. Xia Bai opened fire and only attracted 1 or 2 zombies. With his fire support and the resistance of the survivors over there, the situation seemed to be stable for a while. But stability is only a temporary thing. Hundreds of zombies are no joke. Xia Bai only has 1 gun. The survivors in the supermarket are using very primitive weapons. Before the rolling shutter door is torn open, they are still okay, but now the gap has appeared. These zombies are like crazy, crowding inward crazily. Not only is the rolling shutter door in danger, but the entire door frame has begun to vibrate, and the walls on both sides have cracked and opened huge cracks. Obviously, it is only a matter of time before this wall collapses and zombies swarm in. Chapter 45 Xia Bai's Acquaintance. Chapter 45 Xia Bai's Acquaintance. The situation was critical, and Xia Bai realized that he could no longer watch here. He pulled down directly from the rooftop, killed several zombies in the alley below with a burst of bullets, turned the car around, rushed out of the alley in one breath, and rushed directly towards a supermarket over there. At the same moment, Xia Bai simply lowered the window and threw out a tactical grenade. In an instant, flames shot up in front of the supermarket, and the zombies on the periphery were instantly turned upside down by the explosion. But the survivors in the supermarket were agitated. They were blocked by zombies in the supermarket and could only hear gunshots and explosions. At this moment, they thought that the army troops were coming to rescue them, but they didn't. I was excited for a long time, because quite a few of the previous batch of zombies had already swarmed in, wreaking havoc everywhere in the supermarket, biting everyone they saw, and the scene was extremely bloody. On the other side, Xia Bai's battleship was launching out of the flames. The dilapidated commercial vehicle was surprisingly bright in the firelight. The wheels ran over the broken flesh on the ground and rushed towards the supermarket over there. There were still a large number of zombies at the entrance of the supermarket. Xia Bai sat in the car and once again threw a bomb. It was a bomb that exuded blue light. It landed steadily among the zombies and exploded instantly, freezing the entire 10 square meter area around it, completely freezing the movements of those dense zombies. Xia Bai also got out of the car, picked up the gun in his hand, and opened fire, killing all the way from the outside of the supermarket to the inside. Fire and ice. The smell of smoke and blood mixed together. The supermarket was already in chaos, with zombies and survivors mixed together. The shelves collapsed, and products were everywhere. The light was dim, and only the howls of zombies and the miserable howls of humans could be heard. Xia Bai stopped here. There are not as many zombies in the supermarket as there are outside, but for Xia Bai, they are 100% dangerous. Darkness, narrowness, and chaos are perfect places to successfully ambush humans. Anyone who rushes into such a place alone cannot guarantee that he will escape unscathed here. The dangers posed by this kind of terrain cannot be overcome by any amount of experience and combat capabilities. He just opened fire at the door, waiting for the real survivors to run out from inside, following the sound of gunfire. Back and forth. Within 3 or 4 minutes, only a dozen survivors rushed out, running around in a hurry. Some people fell in front of Xia Bai, asking him if he was from the military and claiming to be his relatives. Still inside, hoping Xia Bai can go in and save people. But that's not possible. Xia Bai only does what he can do, and he will help those he can, but he will not take fearless risks. He was like a god of murder, standing at the entrance of the supermarket covered with ice crystals, mercilessly killing the zombies coming from inside and outside. His body remained motionless, but his eyes were calm and almost cold. There were 16 survivors in the supermarket, and they all looked like they were surviving the disaster. One woman even came to Xia Bai, held his hand tightly, and said with tears in her eyes, "Thank you. Thank you, young man." Xia Bai could understand the excitement of escaping from death. Xia Bai just shook his head and said, "It's just convenient, but I have other things to do, and I can't take you with me. Therefore, you have to find your own car and leave here as soon as possible." The aunt nodded fiercely and said thank you fluently, as if she was so excited that she couldn't say anything else. It was already dusk when Xia Bai drove back to the survivor base of Bingcheng prison, and the setting sun rolled across the sky as if the entire sky was on fire. There are still many survivor convoys outside the Ice City prison, and a large number of survivors still gather every day. Inside the Ice City prison survivor base, there are already simple tents everywhere, and there are even people sleeping in the open everywhere. The focus of party control has also shifted from a two-way focus on survivor security and survivor base security to the latter. Except for the real major conflicts between survivors, most of the military chose to turn a blind eye to other small frictions. After all, the military has limited manpower. It must not only fight against the increasing number of zombies that have gathered outside over time, but also arrange defense and patrols in various places. it must also cooperate with the work of other related departments. There are even a large number of them now. The soldiers have not withdrawn. Even if they want to take care of it, they cannot truly take care of everything. When Xia Bai passed the security check and entered the survivor base, the sky had completely darkened. Commercial vehicles were passing through tents and bunks everywhere. From time to time, there were even embarrassed survivors lying on the car windows to beg Xia Bai, but the car was blocked. No one dares nowadays. The control is gradually loosened, and people are missing inexplicably every day in the survivor base. Anyone who dares to block other people's cars will be run over and killed without anyone taking care of them. Xia Bai had lived here before and knew that the situation had reached this stage. The military was actually deliberately relaxing control. Now was no longer the peaceful era before the end. The military in Bingcheng prison hoped that their survivor base could use a small amount of guidance, form a new system of their own, so that every survivor can truly adapt to this doomsday environment instead of blindly seeking protection. This approach may not be correct from a certain perspective, but it is indeed the military here. The policies implemented are also related to the lack of strength of the military in the Ice City prison survivor base. They cannot guarantee the absolute safety of the survivors, so they must try to let them grow on their own. During these 2 outings, Xia Bai accumulated an astonishing 491 energy points. He silently calculated that, if he continued like this, as long as he was more diligent, he would be able to upgrade the 3rd level battleship in less than 10 days and a half energy points. Thinking of this, Xia Bai couldn't help but feel a little excited. However, at this moment, his commercial vehicle passed by the 3rd building of the prison. He hesitated for a moment, then gradually stopped the car, got out of the car, walked through the tent area, and walked towards the 3rd building. He wanted to see if his acquaintance was here now. Xia Bai's acquaintance is actually a little girl. In his previous life, he was the bottom of the doomsday survivors. When he came to the survivor base of Ice City prison, he only had a pistol snatched from the dead, no food, and no place to stay. Xia Bai is neither a pedophile nor a girlmonger. He only met Yuzuki by chance. At that time, he crawled out from the dead in Ice City. He was chased by zombies and plotted by survivors. He was full of rage. Here, with the gun in his hand, he rushed into a building to get something to eat. This is normal in the apocalypse, and there's nothing wrong with it. And at that time, he met an ignorant little girl. Her name is Yuzuki. She is 8 or 9 years old, and she lives in the corner of the corridor in the 3rd building. That day she met Xia Bai, who was planning to pick a soft persimmon. Instead of panicking, she took the initiative to hand him a piece of chocolate, and he said something. "Brother, please don't steal other people's things." The teacher said, "This is wrong. This is an innocent and silly little girl, but she looks so special in the apocalypse." Xia Bai didn't know why, but he became friends with such a naive little girl inexplicably. According to her own words, her parents died on the first day of the apocalypse, and it was a good big sister who took her to escape. Unfortunately, that big sister also died later, and now she is the only one left. Xia Bai and Yuzuki had been together for about a month, struggling to make ends meet in the Bingcheng prison. However, during a subsequent chaos, the girl disappeared. From then on, Xia Bai never appeared again. Saw her Yuzuki was the first true companion that Xia Bai met in the doomsday of the previous life. Although she was a silly little girl, even after 5 years, Xia Bai still had feelings for this person whom she met at the beginning of the doomsday. I still remember the little girl whom I have known for less than a month. For nothing else, just for the piece of chocolate given to Xia Bai, a stranger. He would never let that girl become a missing person for no reason again. Chapter 46 Let's Go Kill People. Chapter 46 Let's Go Kill People. Xia Bai came to the place in his memory and did not see Yuzuki, but found a dying woman. The woman was only wrapped in a shabby blanket and wore nothing underneath. Her exposed face was bruised and swollen, and her 2 exposed hands were all bruised and severely fractured. Her right hand was even bruised. The man inserted a nail, but the bleeding didn't stop completely. His body was half leaning against the wall behind him, his mouth opening and closing, as if he was struggling to breathe. This was obviously not the girl Xia Bai was looking for, so he was slightly disappointed. However, just as he was about to leave, he suddenly noticed that the woman was clutching a dirty little teddy bear in her hand, which was the same as Xia Bai's memory. Yuzaoka's girl's teddy bear is almost exactly the same. He pondered for a moment, walked forward, and shook the woman's body. After the woman opened her eyes with difficulty, Xia Bai said, "Do you know Yuzaoka, such a person? She is about 8 or 9 years old." Before Xia Bai finished speaking, the woman became slightly excited and said with difficulty, You are Xia." Bai looked at this woman. She obviously knew who Yuzaoka was. He remembered what Yuzaoka had said before about the good sister who brought her to Bingcheng prison. Xia Bai thought for a while. He said, I'm her friend. I met her before the end. I heard someone said that someone saw that little girl here, so I came to take a look." The woman's body trembled hard and said, You are really, yes, her father's name is Yuzaoka, right? What's going on with you? Where is Yuzaoka? Xia Bai frowned. However, the woman became more and more excited, and her dying body even burst out with a little vitality. She struggled and gritted her teeth and said, "It's me. It's my fault. I heard people say that the body can be changed. Food, I will. But that group of people are beasts. They are beasts." When the woman reached this point, Xia Bai understood that this is the most common situation in the apocalypse. Women sell their bodies for supplies. If they meet a good person, this will be a fair trade, but some people simply deceive people. In the past, people were played like animals, played almost to death, and then released back to look for the next target. Similar things abounded. However, there are now 20,000 survivors in the huge Ice City prison survivor base. There are too many survivors. No one can control them, and no one can control them. Xia Bai looked at her broken arm and the iron nails driven into her hand, and said, Yuzaoka was taken away by them. His heart sank slightly. If this matter had nothing to do with him, he would be an indifferent passerby who wouldn't care. But this matter was related to Yuzaoka, and he couldn't look at that silly person. If a little girl falls into the hands of such a person, it will be more painful than being bitten to death by a zombie. The woman nodded fiercely, and saliva flowed from her mouth. It could be seen that 2 of the teeth in her mouth had been pulled out, and they were all covered with blood. "Save her please, because we have known each other before. For my sake, please save her." Xia Bai took a deep breath and said, "Who took her away? Where are those people?" "On the top floor of the 5th building. The leader is the awakened one, named Huan Yichen. The woman gritted her teeth and stuffed the teddy bear and a piece of chocolate into Xia Bai's hand. "I have nothing to give you, but please." Xia Bai grabbed her hand and said, "Don't worry, leave Yuzaoka's matter to me. I'll find someone to help you now. Don't worry about me. I know what I'll look like." The woman shook her head, leaned against the wall behind her, and said, "Thank you. Don't bring her back. If she still asks me, just say her sister doesn't want to." She did. The woman looked at Xia Bai and said solemnly, "Thank you." Xia Bai looked at the woman in front of him and remained silent. She was telling the truth. In this state, even if she could survive, there would be no difference between her and death. He received 2 thank yous today, but for Xia Bai, these 2 thanks were heavier than the last. No one deserves to be in the hands of this scum. Xia Bai looked at the dying woman in front of him, but felt slightly angry in his heart. He took one last look at her, stood up, clutched the thin chocolate in his hand, and walked downstairs. He returned to his car, picked up his walkie-talkie, and contacted Bailand first. After all, there is an awakened person over there. Although it has only been half a month since the end of the world, ordinary awakened people may not be as strong as veteran level doomsday survival masters like Xia Bai, but they must be fully prepared. The call was quickly connected over there, and Bailand said, "What's wrong there?" Communication equipment was also made by Battleship. They bought 2 sets and spent a full 50 energy points. However, the communication equipment produced by Battleship is very powerful, the signal is stable, and the communication distance can be guaranteed to be within 2 kilometers. In the current situation, it is also very important to maintain communication. Therefore, Xia Bai basically has one on the battleship and one on the survivor base to ensure that the two sides can contact each other. As soon as the communication was connected, Xia Bai said, "I have a situation here and I need help." Bai Lang was slightly surprised and then said, "Where is it? I'll go there now." She came over without even asking about the situation. Xia Bai felt a little warm in his heart. He even heard Hao Zhuang's voice coming from inside. "The boss is calling people. Something big must have happened. Where is it? Let's go quickly." Xia Bai frowned instead and said, "Inside the Bingcheng prison, there are a bunch of bastard survivors. Hao Zhuang and the others haven't even mastered their guns. They can fight zombies, but they can't cause enough trouble to deal with the survivors. No. If necessary, let Hao Zhuang and the others take care of the house honestly, and don't let others snatch our supplies. Therefore, you can come here, but, Bai Lan, I must remind you that there are awakened people here, and it may be very dangerous." Danger before Xia Bai could finish speaking, Bai Lan interrupted, "If I don't go, you will go too, right? So let's just tell you, where is it? How can we do it after we get there?" Xia Bai exhaled. Only then did he realize that he was thinking too much. In his previous life, he was used to being a lone ranger. Even if he had a companion in this life, sometimes his thoughts were more like those of a lone ranger at that moment. He stopped talking nonsense, explained the situation and location, and said, "When it's over, I'll treat everyone to hot pot." Then, Xia Bai's tone suddenly turned cold, and he said with murderous intent, "As for how to do it, it's very simple. We will go directly to the door to kill. It's not easy to write a new book. To the book lovers who pass by and who like this book, I hope you can collect it and vote for it. Your support is the motivation for me to write." Chapter 47 The Big Customer Who Bought Missiles. Chapter 47 The Big Customer Who Bought Missiles. Bai Lan agreed to Xia Bai's invitation to kill without any hesitation. The awakened girl also set off immediately. Although she set off late, Xia Bai's car drove slowly in the overcrowded survivor base, and the two of them arrived at the downstairs of the 5th building almost without any separation. Bai Lan was also fully armed, carrying a gun, and wearing a bulletproof vest that Xia Bai got from Yang Chengxi. He looked quite heroic, but Xia Bai knew clearly that Bai Lan's marksmanship was not much better than Hao Zhuang and the others, so he took action after a while. What Bai Lan relies on is the strength of being an awakened person. They went directly to the top floor. The situation here was just as the woman said. Even the corridor had been modified, and a partition was put up to connect the three large rooms together. Huang Yichen seemed to be not only he is an awakened person, and seems to have a lot of resources in his hands. When Xia Bai and the others came up, a little brother who was guarding the door noticed them. Looking at Xia Bai and Bai Lan who were clearly coming over, he frowned slightly and said, "What are you doing? What is this? Don't you know the place? This is the venue of Biyuan University. Get out of here. Get out of here." Hearing this, Xia Bai was a little surprised. These scumbags are actually college students. However, in fact, this kind of thing has nothing to do with identity. Bai Lan and the others are also college students, but they have chosen a completely different way of survival from this group of people. This little brother couldn't finish what he said. Because at that moment, a gun barrel was directly pressed against his head. Xia Bai pressed the man with the muzzle of his gun, forcing him from standing to kneeling. The man's expression changed wildly and he said, "You don't dare to kill me." Before he could finish his words, Xia Bai fired. The man's head instantly exploded with a large amount of blood, and his whole body fell backwards, hitting the ground heavily. Xia Bai's shot shook the entire floor, and it was almost obvious that he had done it. Seeing Xia Bai take action, Bai Lan also took a deep breath, no longer hesitated, took a step forward, raised his foot, and with a neat kick, used the terrifying power of the awakened person to directly install the fan on the partition. The iron door flew out and hit the open space inside hard. At this moment, people in the room also turned their heads and looked at Xia Bai here. Xia Bai glanced around and saw that there were about 20 people in the room. He didn't know who Huang Yichen was, but in the doomsday, he would either kill them all or not kill any of them. Therefore, Xia Bai didn't intend to care who was who. However, at this time, a voice rang out from the group of people. Hey, isn't this brother Xia? Xia Bai was stunned for a moment, turned around, and saw the arms dealer Yang Chengxi among the group of people. He and several of his people seemed to be discussing business here. When he saw Xia Bai rushing in with murderous intent, he stood up and said hello warmly. Xia Bai said, "Why are you here, doing business?" Yang Chengxi glanced at Bai Lan, seeming to have realized from the kick just now that this was the awakened one, with this Mr. Huang Yichen. "But you are Huang." Yichen was really a college student. He looked about the same age as Xia Bai after his rebirth. He also frowned at this moment. He looked at Xia Bai and then at Xiaoqi behind him. He seemed to understand something. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Xia Bai didn't respond in a hurry. His eyes swept around the corner and finally landed on a small body in the corner. That was Xiaoqi. Her hands and feet were tied up. His mouth was also taped shut, and he was placed in the corner of the room. Yang Chengxi noticed his gaze, realized something, and said with a smile, "Are you here to fish for money? What a coincidence. I just told brother Huang Yichen, can you let this girl go? She is so big. Arrest her. It's not a glamorous thing for such an old little girl to enjoy." Xia Bai glanced at Yang Chengxi and realized that what this guy said might be true, because before that, if Xiaoqi was really killed by Huang Yichen and his gang, Xia Bai would not have met him in the previous life. Looking at this little girl, it seems that Yang Chengxi saved her in the previous life. Yang Chengxi looked at Xia Bai, then at Huang Yichen, and said, "Oh, how about this? Brother Huang, you let him go, and brother Xia here also takes a step back. How about that, Huang?" Yichen said coldly, "He kicked open my door and killed my people. I just let him go like this. Can I still hang out?" Xia Bai said calmly, "I never leave hidden dangers." Yang Chengxi was also decisive. He smiled, stood up directly, and walked out with his people. He was so decisive that everyone in the venue was a little surprised. Huang Yichen said directly, "Brother Zhi, there's no need to leave. Can't I still deal with these two people? I can definitely guarantee your safety. Sorry, since you have a conflict with brother Xia, I will not do business with you." Huang Yichen was surprised. He didn't expect that Yang Chengxi, a well-known material dealer in the Ice City survivor prison, would be so biased towards a certain person. The most important thing was that the person being biased was Huang Yichen's enemy, so he said with some displeasure, "What do you mean?" Yang Chengxi had already reached the door. He looked at Xia Bai and said, "It's not interesting. I just won't do it. Brother Xia Bai, I'm just outside. If you need help, just give me a shout." Xia Bai said, "No need." Yang Chengxi smiled and said, "I guess not." Huang Yichen's expression over there was extremely ugly at this moment. He crushed the water glass in his hand and said angrily, "Yang Chengxi, you are so biased today. Don't regret it in the future." "It's not that regretful. I'm in business. I seek good fortune and avoid misfortune. You should understand." Huang Yichen said, "There are only two of them. Do you think we can't defeat two of them?" Yang Chengxi shook his head and said, "Customers who dare to buy missiles from me, now that they are here, no matter how many there are, there should be no reason for failure, and it is not right for you to kidnap a little girl just to have a good time. What a good thing. Now it's going to die. I'm actually quite happy." He smiled and said to Xia Bai, "Brother Xia Bai, I have got one Thunder 8 now, but don't worry, I will definitely get it. I will figure out the rest slowly. Remember to pick up the goods in 2 days." Bai Lan looked at Xia Bai, her eyes full of questions. "Buy missiles?" And Huang Yichen over there was also shocked. Who the hell is the customer who buys missiles? Book lovers, please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. It is not easy to write a new book, and it is still being recommended. I hope you can support me a lot. Herbal Tea is here to thank you all. Chapter 48 Kill the Awakening Man. Chapter 48 Kill the Awakening Man. Huang Yichen looked cold. In his opinion, Xia Bai and Bai Lan were actually seeking death. Although Yang Chengxi seemed to have great confidence in these two people because of the missile incident, in Huang Yichen's view, even if Xia Bai, it is impossible to use the missile here if Bai actually holds the missile in his hand. Although the military turns a blind eye to many things, it does not mean that no one will care about your use of heavy weapons. Therefore, if it was just these two people, why should they fight with a dozen people on their side? Yes, they were all college students originally, but they did not rely entirely on luck along the way. Moreover, they were able to occupy a small half of the top floor of the 5 buildings, and sometimes they could find an unlucky survivor woman to vent. It all depends on one's own ability. Huang Yichen himself is an awakener. Why should these two people who are about the same age as him, and not in the military system, fight with him? But Huang Yichen was really a little annoyed, not only because of Xia Bai's tough attitude when he came to the door, but also because of Yang Chengxi's disapproval of him. At this moment, Yang Chengxi over there suddenly said, "Hey, by the way, you two get that girl over here first." Under Yang Chengxi's instructions, his 2 men immediately took action to bring Yu Zhaoqi out first. Although the little girl's mouth was sealed, she could hear and see. She stared at the scene in the field, and to be honest, she was a little confused. Huang Yichen changed his color and said, "What do you mean, Yang?" Chengxi said calmly, "I said, I don't like people who touch children. When I have children in the future, I don't want my children to be used as tools to vent their anger. So even if Brother Xia doesn't come, I still want this girl. Take it away." "Why, do you want to fall out with me too?" Huang Yichen changed his color slightly when he heard this. He really didn't dare to fall out with Yang Chengxi. Everyone knew that Yang Chengxi had great powers and a military background. Who dared to touch him? Therefore, Huang Yichen just gritted his teeth, turned around, and rushed towards Xia Bai and the others, ready to vent all his anger on these people. He vowed to kill Xia Bai and the others, and make Yang Chengxi regret this. Huang Yichen let out a sarcastic sneer and said, "Ha, I don't care who you are, or what your relationship is with that girl, but I still want to thank you for bringing me a more beautiful one." As he spoke, his eyes immediately turned to Bailan, with a naked and vulgar look in his eyes, and then he said, "You still have a chance to surrender now. If a man commits suicide, if a woman kneels down and gives me a blowjob, I will let you live." Huang Yichen said this, but he also knew that no one would agree to this proposal, so while speaking, he directly touched his gun on the table. However, his movements were fast, but Xia Bai's movements were even faster. He raised his hand and fired a shot, which destroyed the gun on the table. If Huang Yichen hadn't reacted quickly and quickly pulled back, this shot would have been destroyed. Maybe even his right hand will be disabled. Huang Yichen changed color and lifted the table in front of him. The younger brothers behind him shouted and planned to follow Huang Yichen, who was the awakened one, to charge. They only had 3 pistols in their hands. Although this was a very powerful level among ordinary ability users, it was still not enough in front of Xia Bai. He threw a smoke bomb directly with his hand. In an instant, smoke billowed into the sky. Huang Yichen was confused for a while and couldn't help but stop. However, just when Huang Yichen stopped, he heard a sputtering sound, as if something had been thrown over. Huang Yichen was not that thing, but he instinctively felt the warning signs and evaded to one side like lightning, which saved his life. There was a loud bang. He turned around in shock and saw a scene that made his eyes split open. In the smoke of the smoke bomb, a terrifying ice crystal exploded. In an instant, the temperature in the space dropped by more than 10 degrees. More than half of Huang Yichen's dozen people were frozen in an instant. However, due to the presence of smoke, Huang Yichen could not see clearly yet. He only heard the sound of heavy gunshots. That was Xia Bai shooting in the smoke. Huang Yichen found it unbelievable. How did this guy identify other people's positions in the smoke? Xia Bai had survived for 5 years at the end of the world, and his combat capabilities were already comparable to those of special forces. Naturally, they were not comparable to those of ordinary people. However, Huang Yichen used this to confirm Xia Bai's position. In addition, at this moment, the smoke gradually began to dissipate, so he directly picked up a stool beside him and threw it directly in the direction of the gunfire past. However, what Huang Yichen didn't expect was that as soon as he smashed the thing out, a slender figure jumped in front of him. That was Bailan. This awakened girl couldn't find anyone for a long time because of the smoke bomb. Huang Yichen's attack also exposed her position, so she rushed over directly, but her white fists carried a powerful force enough to break the steel bars. Directly it hit Huang Yichen head on point. However, at the critical moment, Huang Yichen stretched out his hand, opened his hand, and directly grasped Baolan's fist in his hand, bearing the opponent's power without changing his expression point. If an ordinary person dared to receive Baolan's punch, his wrist would be broken point. But Huang Yichen was also an awakened person. Feeling the power coming from Baolan's palm, he suddenly realized that this girl was also an awakened person. He couldn't help but sneered, twisted his backhand, and deflected Baolan's at the same time. He raised his hand high and was about to smash it down. He sneered, "Sister, do you know how to fight?" Baolan's face changed slightly. However, at this moment, heavy gunfire sounded in the field. A bullet penetrated directly into Huang Yichen's wrist. The man immediately changed color and let out a miserable howl. Immediately afterwards, heavy gunfire sounded one after another, and as the smoke dispersed, Xia Bai walked out step by step. He fired 5 shots in a row, hitting Huang Yichen's limbs and abdomen respectively. The man was bleeding profusely and howling miserably in an instant. Baolan also escaped from his grasp, took a deep breath, and looked at Xia Bai. Xia Bai came to Huang Yichen step by step, put his gun against the awakened person's head, and replied what the other person just said. "Do you know how to fight?" Huang Yichen couldn't understand. How could these two people be killed so easily among a dozen of them? He gritted his teeth, looked at Xia Bai in front of him, and hissed, "I'm an awakened person. It's impossible." "How is it possible? You are not even an awakened person." "You, what?" responded to him was a heavy gunshot, and the bullet penetrated the man's head. Even if he was an awakened person, he would only die violently. But at this moment, the place was already in a mess. All of Huang Yichen's younger brothers were dead, and those who were frozen were shot to pieces by Xia Bai and turned into pieces of broken corpses on the ground. Yang Chengxi looked at this scene and smacked his mouth with unsatisfied thoughts. The battle ended more smoothly than Xia Bai imagined. This awakened person did not exert his own fighting power at all. It was not at the same level as the invincible awakened people Xia Bai had seen in the middle and late stages of the apocalypse. This was also normally. Doesn't Baolan have the power of an awakened person now, but doesn't know how to use it at all? In the early days of the apocalypse, no one could transform their abilities into combat effectiveness so quickly. Xia Bai glanced at the corpses everywhere, exhaled, turned and walked out. Yu Zhaoqi over there had also been untied a long time ago. The little girl wearing a dirty pink dress looked at Xia Bai coming in front of her, raised her head slightly, opened her big eyes and said, "Thank you." Xia Bai sighed and touched the girl's head. "Don't thank me. It was your sister who asked me to come here. She said you were taken away, and then I came to find you." As he said that, Xia Bai took out the chocolate with a wrinkled packaging bag from his pocket and said, "Here, this is what she gave you, and the teddy bear is in my car below." Yee. Zhaoqi raised her head, a little confused. Xia Bai said, "You don't have to worry about her anymore. She ran away with a handsome guy. She doesn't want you anymore and wants you to follow me." "But, the eldest sister." Zhaoqi was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly lowered her head silently. Obviously, she seemed to understand what really happened. After a while, she said, "Okay, the eldest sister doesn't want me. However, I can't follow you. I will cause trouble for you." At this moment, the little girl raised her head and showed a very sweet smile to Xia Bai. "So, thank you, but I can't cause you any trouble." Xia Bai was a little confused. At this moment, Baolan finally took a step forward, gave Xia Bai a "I'm here" look, and knelt down to talk to the girl. The corner of Xia Bai's mouth twitched, not knowing what to say. Seeing this, Yang Chengxi, who had been standing outside, walked over, handed over a cigarette, and said, "It's really exciting, but are you interested? Please explain what happened to the ice explosion before." Xia Bai thought for a while and said, "Then tell me, where did you get the channels to get so many weapons without anyone noticing?" Yang Chengxi took a puff of his cigarette, chuckled twice, and said, "You killed someone so blatantly, how will the military explain it?" Xia Bai said, "With so many people in the base now, no one cares about people like Huang Yichen. Even if I kill him, it won't be a big deal, right?" Yang Chengxi nodded and said, that's true. Maybe you don't know, right? I don't intend to do anything about it. That Commander Li Jianbei is a figure. He wants to make Bingcheng Prison a new social system. The military only cares about it. Big things, these small fights, even if some people die, in his opinion, it is beneficial to the survivors. Yang Chengxi, who has always been careless, couldn't help but sigh slightly when he mentioned this level, and said, Old Li, he has no choice. The situation is not good. The Scientific Research Institute cannot produce anti-zombie serum, and the military cannot guarantee everyone's safety. We must encourage people to survive and protect themselves, and adopt special measures in extreme situations. When Xia Bai heard this, he took another look at this guy. Did this guy call the top executive of the Bingcheng prison survivor base old Li Yang Chengxi seemed to realize that he had said the wrong thing, smiled, and patted Xia Bai on the shoulder. But justice and fairness still have to be there. You will be in trouble, but it's okay. I'm here. Let's go here today. I'm doing things for big clients for free. Xia Bai looked at Yang Chengxi with a ruthless look on his face and thought, if he had let Huang Yichen and the others be wiped out just now, this guy might have another story now. Dear book lovers, if you like this book, don't forget to favorite it, and vote when you pass by. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to code. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49. Is there someone above? To outsiders, gunshots rang out for a full 10 minutes, mixed with screams and loud noises. No one knew what happened in these 10 minutes. The survivors living in the 5th building all huddled together. No one dared to come out of their room. They only knew that when the military people arrived, the fighting here was completely over. But what people know is that the two young men with their children finally came out alive. For Xia Bai, this battle was easier than he imagined. After all, college students are just college students. Although they are much more ruthless, they are not enough for Xia Bai, a doomsday veteran whose individual combat ability is comparable to that of special forces. In fact, Huang Yichen's firepower is not enough at all. A smoke one bullet was enough to confuse his younger brothers. Among the ordinary survivors, they may now be the leaders, but in the previous 5 years of the apocalypse, Xia Bai had killed zombies and even humans, and was extremely proficient in killing people. Coupled with Bailan's existence, it will undoubtedly only take a matter of minutes to eliminate these people. If Huang Yichen, as the awakened person, was not so useless, the situation might be different. Of course, Xia Bai first found out that this group of people came here only because they were college students, so there would be no chance of him bumping into a veteran's iron plate. And as Yang Chengxi said, the military was late in arriving. When Xia Bai and the others left the building and wanted to take Xia Bai away for investigation, Xia Bai was not too nervous. He had stayed here for a long time in his previous life. He knew that what Yang Chengxi said before was not false. With the increase in the number of people with abilities, the Bingcheng prison survivor base did use a semi-free range system posture, and Xia Bai killed scum. The military would not really do anything. Even if there were military members related to Huang Yichen and the others, they would not speak out for a group of dead people. However, before Xia Bai could speak, Yang Chengxi stood up directly, hugged the shoulders of the leading soldier, and said a few words. The group of soldiers looked at Xia Bai twice and left directly. Yang Chengxi smiled at Xia Bai with a ruthless face, gave Bailan a wink, and then walked away gracefully with a few of his own. Xia Bai was inexplicably enjoying the treatment of someone above. Moreover, after today's situation, Xia Bai is somewhat famous among the survivors of Bingcheng prison. The two of them rushed to the family's hometown and killed them all. But they came out like everyone else. How could they not let him go? The military's pursuit is absolutely legendary among the current Ice City prison survivor base. Xia Bai didn't think so much. They returned directly to Building 9. I don't know what kind of method Bailan used. Yi Zioki followed them honestly in the end. Although Xia Bai said he would come back to eat hot pot, He actually didn't eat hot pot. Today was a difficult day for Yuzaoki, but Xia Bai's heart was not that big yet. He handed her a box of chocolates next to Yuzaoki, who was sitting in a corner in a daze. Yuzaoki was stunned for a moment, looked at Xia Bai, and whispered, thank you, Xia Bai shook his head and said very proudly, there's nothing to thank you for. We have a lot of things here. Whatever you want to eat, just take it. Anyway, we have plenty of supplies here. Xia Bai was telling the truth. He really has plenty of supplies, not to mention the supplies he got when he came to Bingcheng prison before. After he came to Bingcheng prison, he also used gold, which was very cheap for him, in exchange for a large amount of supplies. During these 2 outings, Xia Bai was hunting zombies. At the same time, they were also sweeping all kinds of high-end materials along the way. Therefore, Xia Bai was not talking nonsense at this moment. Yuzaoki could not help but be stunned. Although she is not very old, her temperament is definitely far beyond the average of her peers. Therefore, she is very aware of how valuable materials are in the apocalypse. If this box of chocolates is left outside, others may even steal it. She couldn't help but raise her head and look at Xia Bai in front of her. Xia Bai smiled and said, didn't you say that yourself? You have to look forward. I hope that everything that happened before will not make you depressed. Yuzaoki shook his head. At that moment, Bailan also came over, sat down next to the girl, rubbed Yuzaoki's little head, and said, why do I feel that Xia Bai treats you as good as his own daughter? Xia Bai, how old am I? What do you mean by a biological daughter? Bailan smiled and said, if you are not your own daughter, and you are so kind to other girls, then you must have bad intentions. Little guy, you should be careful about this person. Maybe there is something underneath this good person's appearance. He hides an extremely vulgar heart. Bailan, a serious guy, rarely joked, but Xia Bai still felt like he had received a critical hit of 10,000 points. On the other side, Hao Zhuang, squatting in the corner, looked at this side and sighed from the bottom of his heart. Where are the hot pots we promised? Why is it so yellow? Xia Bai exhaled. He really didn't expect that he would reunite with his old friend Yuzaoki in this way in this life. In the previous life, this cute little lolly once helped Xia Bai in the early days of the apocalypse. The pillar of support, her optimism and smile seem to be able to influence everyone, but at the same time, she is also a helpless person under the torrent of doomsday. But in this life, everything will change. When you are reborn, what you want to change is your regrettable fate, isn't it? It's a pity that Yuzaoki kept secret about her past in her previous life. Otherwise, if Xia Bai knew where she lived, or the exact time she arrived in Ice City, things might have been better. Xia Bai also knew that, even if he was a reborn person, it was impossible to guarantee that everything would develop in a good direction. Yuzaoki is still a little acquainted with life, but she is a very cheerful little girl. In her previous life, she was better than Xia Bai. According to her own words, that was what her father taught her. No matter when and what she encounters, in any situation, she must look forward. Although she may still have many things weighing on her mind, she seems very happy every day. Within 2 days, she became the happy fruit among Xia Bai and the others. In the following days, Xia Bai was not idle. He ran out whenever he had time these days. Although he said he was going out to collect supplies, in fact, he was still hunting zombies to earn energy points, and on this day, November 3rd, Xia Bai was about to go out, and he saw Hao Zhuang in the corner. They had not been idle in the base for the past 2 days, practicing shooting in the base, while he did odd jobs for the military to earn supplies. When Xia Bai was away, he might even handle some business with Yang Qingzi. Bailan cooperated with the military experiments, and was able to get a lot of things. Although they were in the base, they were not idle. Xia Bai mainly hunted zombies, so he basically didn't take Bailan and others with him when he went out, but they did instead. They felt a little embarrassed. Even though they knew it was dangerous outside, they all shouted to go out with Xia Bai. At this moment, Xia Bai's heart moved slightly and said, Hao Zhuang, are you free? Do you have time to go out with me? Recently, I have been paying attention to everyone's book reviews, rewards, and votes. I have also paid attention to some of your opinions. I have almost memorized many people's IDs. Thank you for your support, but the Kidian number is not known when binding the mobile phone number. What is the problem that prevents me from replying and commenting? I can only reply to you here. I'm really sorry, but I promise you that I will write it down and live up to your support. I cannot guarantee that what I write will always be everyone can like it, but I will definitely try my best to write it well. I hope everyone can continue to support herbal tea in this book. Thank you. Then, continue to ask for recommendation votes, collections, and all kinds of support, dear book lovers. During the new book period, I hope you will support me. Finally, a book club group was established today. Friends who are interested can add it. 850,694,517 Chapter 50 Growth. November 3rd. Xia Bai was slowly parking the battleship in front of a small warehouse, which was located near the suburbs and nearly 2 kilometers away from the Bingcheng prison survivor base. The front door of Kangmei is not big and the lighting is not good, but the door of Kangmei collapsed in half, and a zombie was stuck on the door. The appearance of the zombie was extremely terrifying. The body was torn from the middle. The back half of the body was at the door, and the front half was in front of the door. However, the two parts were still brokenly connected, and various organs were entangled and collapsed. It was stuck here on the door. It was originally like a dead body hanging there, but with the appearance of 2 living people, Xia Bai and Hao Zuang. It seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. He howled and moved in an instant, waving his arms and screaming crazily. He kept waving his arms towards Xia Bai and the others. The stuck body exerted force bit by bit. In the infiltrating sound, its twists were entangled in all the organs were slowly stretched and torn apart. Xia Bai glanced at Hao Zuang. Hao Zuang understood, pulled out the gun from his waist, and shot the zombie with a single shot. In the past month and a half, this group of college students have also undergone qualitative changes. They are even gradually able to use guns. Although they cannot reach the level of Xia Bai or regular soldiers in using guns, at least they can't even control the recoil. The target can also have a higher hit rate. The zombie was dead. Hao Zuang exhaled slightly and said, "Boss, this is..." Xia Bai said, "This kind of place is usually a place that has not been looted by anyone." As he opened the door, he said, "In fact, there should be no one passing by here. Otherwise, if someone had searched, the zombie would not be at the door, or if someone passed by, using this kind of thing to attack the living flesh and blood would be impossible. Desire, it has long since torn itself apart and chased survivors, so although this place is disgusting, it is probably a place with everything it needs." Xia Bai talked about these doomsday robbery experiences he had summed up in his previous life while walking inside. Sure enough, although the shelves inside were scattered, they were fully stocked with all kinds of things that had not been searched by another survivor. Hao Zuang followed Xia Bai closely. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but said, "Sure enough, I haven't been searched. I'll go and ship it. The things we bought in this warehouse can't even be loaded in our car." He couldn't finish what he said, because at this moment, another howl suddenly sounded from the corner, and a zombie with a relatively complete body rushed out from the dimly lit corner of Kangmei. Hao Zuang suddenly changed his color, but at this moment a gunshot sounded in his ears. That was Xia Bai's fire. With one shot, the zombie fell down. Hao Zuang took a sharp breath. Xia Bai said, "Don't let your guard down, don't even think about it, since there is no one outside. How did that zombie get on the door?" Hao Zuang took a deep breath and said, "To be honest, I make progress faster by following the boss. We walked for only half a day, and I feel like I'm almost becoming a survival expert." Xia Bai glanced at this guy and said, "There is still a long way to go. When will you get used to dealing with emergencies before you can truly survive? Moreover, this thing is just like playing games. Just being conscious is useless. Even if you don't know how to use a gun, or if you are stupid, when you encounter a zombie, you will still die. Everyone needs to grow up." Xia Bai may be a little stronger now, and play a greater role in the entire team, leaving more opportunities for Hao Zuang and others to grow. But in the future, when they leave Bingcheng prison, the survivor base is such a hotbed, and they must cooperate with each other. Especially in the middle and late stages of the apocalypse, One person's development is very limited, and an efficient and strong team is very important. Point now Hao Zhuang and the others mainly rely on Xia Bai, and Xia Bai will rely on them in the future. His battleships are not driven by one person, they need people. In the future, they will also need people when they operate outside. Xia Bai asked them to practice guns in the base some time ago. Now I plan to take them out one by one for real exercise. Point during his stay at the Bingcheng prison survivor base, Xia Bai was confident that Hao Zhuang, a bunch of good for nothing former college students, could become his real helpers. Hao Zhuang followed Xia Bai closely and said, "Boss, did you train all this before the end of the world? You are not the kind of soldier king of the end of the world, are you?" To be honest, after following Xia Bai on a trip, Hao Zhuang really admired him from the bottom of his heart. He was a military enthusiast before the end of the world, and he also exercised every day. When the end of the world came, he thought he could use the foundation he had accumulated. But the real situation in the apocalypse was far more complicated than he imagined. He asked himself, if he had never been able to survive to this day, he would have died when the school bus overturned. Xia Bai was obviously a college student, but he had amazing abilities. Their execution and combat capabilities have led them all the way to where they are today. Although they were always laughing and joking, and seemed to have helped Xia Bai a lot along the way, Hao Zhuang and the others knew that Bailan might be stronger, and they were just hugging each other. In this world, no one likes someone who hugs someone's thigh. Hao Zhuang and the others don't want to be a drag on Bailan and Xia Bai. When Xia Bai went out, they were all trying to improve their physical fitness and practice their guns over and over again. They hope to be Xia Bai's real helper, and they also believe that if one day all of them have this kind of survivability, their small team of doomsday survivors will definitely be able to live more comfortably than now. In fact, Xia Bai had already seen this, but he didn't say anything at the same time. It was enough for him to know that Hao Zhuang and the others were working hard to grow up. This was the early days of the apocalypse, and ordinary people were mostly just ordinary people. Xia Bai didn't. Maybe everyone is required to be as strong as the reborn person himself. Sometimes, saying nothing is much better than saying everything clearly. In fact, the fighting power of Hao Zhuang and the others now far exceeds that of ordinary survivors. Hao Zhuang and Bailan are the teammates that Xia Bai can really feel at ease with. They may not be that strong yet, but at the current speed, it won't take long for them to truly grow up. Xia Bai smiled, threw a backpack to Hao Zhuang, and said, "Be careful, there may be mourners in this room." He couldn't finish what he said, because at this moment, he heard a series of brake sounds outside the supermarket door. Several cars were parked outside. There are not many zombies in a place like this, so where do the people come from? Xia Bai frowned slightly and said, "I'll take a look, but don't show your face yet." With that said, he went out with his gun. Just as Hao Zhuang was about to say something, he suddenly heard a rustling sound, as if something was moving. He turned his head in panic, and looked at Kang. By Dark Corners. Dear book lovers, please collect, recommend, vote and support in any way. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.